for the Franklin Board of Education. The meeting has been properly posted. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mrs. Yank,
Here.
Mrs. Sapersky,
Here.
Dr. Khan,
Here.
Mrs. Witkowski, Dr. Beer,
Here.
Mr. Sprague.
Here.
We are all present.
Thank you. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion was made by Mrs. Witkowski, seconded by Dr. Khan. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Community comment, since we do have a rather large agenda and we are fairly full, I will not read through the entire community comment, but please, if you plan to speak, you need to be a resident of the Franklin Public School District, and please keep it to 3 minutes. We will have a timer. I have 3 slips up here of people that wish to speak. If there are more, please tell me so that I can announce your name. Otherwise, I will start with Bernie Carrion, please.
These are on automatic, these mics? Okay. Hi, I'm Bernie Carey. I'm a parent here in the district, and I'm just here advocating because I'm not sure what's on the agenda for anything like that, but it's something that was alarmed me last year and in the beginning of the school year. My son, I have 2 kids max and me in the district. They've only ever gone to school here. They love it. We love the schools here. We decided to stay and be committed because, we know this is a great school district, but I was alarmed. It's a lot different than when I was growing up. So my son came home from school, I think at the beginning of this school year, he said something like, all the teachers are gone. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, well, that's not realistic. I said, what do you actually mean all the teachers are gone? He's like, well, the teachers are leaving. I said, well, okay, be specific. What's going on? And then he started like listing names, and I started asking my daughter too. And when I was going to school growing up, and, and obviously this is, I don't want to say my age, but it's a while ago, teaching staff was pretty stable. It was just something we took for granted growing up that, the teachers wanted to be there, they felt valued, and it was just part of like, the pride you had in the school. And so I want to be careful in saying like, we're very proud of the schools here. We have great experiences and things like that, but it is alarming, and I just want to kind of give you my son's perspective because he doesn't know why teachers leave. He doesn't know teachers' retirement and things like that and move on. But it's alarming to think from his perspective that, he might misinterpret that. As and unfortunately, that maybe it's a place that some people don't want to stay, which I want to be careful about saying because we've decided to stay here. We love it here, but I know what the job market is like for teachers. There's a low supply and high demand, especially in certain areas, and I really want Franklin schools to attract and retain the best, and you have to have in this market and a predictable pay scale and aggressive compensation. And when I hear things like 5% compensation increases for teachers, I kind of can, you can kind of do the math that for a lot of families that might work out to essentially what is like in reality like a pay cut and things like that. And I think it's really unfortunate too because post Act 10 that oftentimes for teachers to find their value, they unfortunately have to leave their district, put themselves on the market and see what the highest bidder is. When I went to, side note, I'm also a teacher too, so I have first-hand experience of this, and it's heartbreaking because I never, I've taught at several school districts, but again, I'm speaking as a parent, but I also have that teacher's perspective too, because it was heartbreaking to leave a district, a couple of districts ago, where I really wanted to stay loyal to, but it was hard to turn it down when you put yourself on the market. People are offering these things. So I was just like asking my kids, like, what do you actually mean, like teachers are leaving? And so I started asking questions about, like, this is some of their favorite teachers they've had. I put a star by some of these, like, and I don't know why these teachers have left. I don't know, it's not my business, not my kids' business, but it's overall, if any of these are related to economic reasons, I think that's something that the school board and this district has control over to be aggressive in how they compensate teachers. But, he started mentioning names like Miss Carney. Oh, this is my daughter, Miss Dahl. These are teachers they said were no longer working there, Miss Gangler. One of my son's favorite
Maybe
teachers of all
just give us maybe not the names of the teachers.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, I was just like super excited. 'Cause one of his favorite science teachers, then I'll say, that he had last year, he was upset because that teacher had left. So I want to like, just advocate for them. And excuse me for mentioning names. I wasn't supposed to do that. I'm sorry, but I also wanted to mention a bunch of names of teachers that they've had a lot of good experiences here, and I don't want to like undermine that by saying my concerns about their impression might be that it's a place where people don't want to stay, because I think that's inaccurate. So hopefully there's some power the school board can do that to compensate teachers, be aggressive and compensate them for what they deserve. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mary Karolewicz, please.
Mary Karolewicz, 8208 West Coventry Drive, and I don't think I could do a better job than what Bernie just said, but I will have to agree with him, and I wonder if you all know what the definition of fortitude is. Fortitude is the mental and emotional strength in facing difficulty, adversity, danger, or temptation courageously. And I want you to think about that, because I'm asking you to take that on. I'm asking you to take that mantle of fortitude on in the next couple weeks, because I know that you have to make a big decision regarding how you are going to treat and respect and show your respect for the people who are on the front lines of our schools. 2 weeks ago, when we met as a negotiations team, there were 47 other staff members who also came to listen to the proposal of a 5% increase versus a 4% increase, which, while it's an improvement, was a little bit disappointing because it doesn't cover inflation, nor does it cover the proposed 12% increases between your medical and dental insurance premiums. And considering that the district has lost approximately 20% each year of just professional staff, not even support staff, but just professional staff, for the last 3 years, 20% for the last 3 years each year, we believe that you need to increase our offer to more than 5%. Districts in the area have offered more than 5%, 6%, 7%, 8%, 12%. And you all know that because you all read the paper, you all listen to the news. And not only that, but many of them have a clear salary advancement system in place, which we no longer have. And either for the support staff or for the professional staff. And that does not help people to develop a clear vision of where they can go in the future. Based on our organization's survey, 85% of the staff that answered the survey said they know people who left or are leaving the district because of the lack of salary advancement. And they know people who are still considering that. And lack of salary advancement or pay is the most common reason that they have heard people leaving. How much longer is our district going to deny that this exodus is a real problem? And it has a lot to do with the economics. We know that just sitting around this table, that you have worked very hard for where you are and for what you have. But these people back here also work that hard, and maybe even more, because every day they have to go home and they have to figure out how they're going to fit in their family time and their leisure time and their work time. And it doesn't stop at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. And it doesn't often, it starts before 6 o'clock in the morning. Research has shown that excelling school districts have tight, cohesive teams made of experienced and new teachers. It also has shown that students are more successful when they are taught by seasoned teachers. Consistency and continuity of staff in schools is necessary not only for the kids, but for the teachers themselves, because they rely on the team that they work with, knowing that there is continuity of thought, trust, cohesiveness, and not only that, historical background and knowledge, what worked and what didn't work. Did you know that 2/3 of our 316 teaching staff, or roughly 210 people, have been in our district less than 10 years? And of that number, 122 were hired between the years 2021 and 23. I know that over the course of the last 5 years, Franklin has hired an average of somewhere between 30 to 54 teachers per year. When I was on the board, that was not the case. Of those hired in 2017 and 18, only 9 from each of those hiring classes remains in our district. In 2019, 20 of the new hires remain, and only 13 of the 2020 new hires remain. Your
Mary,
most senior
It's
staff.
been about 4.5 minutes, Mary. Are you
I
coming
know,
in
I'm
for-
sorry. I'm almost done. Your most senior staff, or 104 people, have start dates of 1986 to 2014, and they will be leaving soon. And then what will you be forced to do? Support staff is roughly 24% of them have been in the district 10 or more years. So HR has been working very hard, and they have their hands full trying to keep up with a revolving door of personnel. Please, please consider an 8% increase and develop that salary advancement program, which I know we are starting in next week, actually. Do you have the fortitude to make this decision? It's going to be tough, but please, please find a way to do it. And please make the case to the community. The community wants to have good schools. You just heard it yourself. And we need to have highly qualified individuals in there in order for our students to be
Thank you, Mary.
successful. Thank you very much.
Dana Gint, please.
Good evening. Dana Gint, 9011 West Hawthorne Lane. I have 2 children in the Franklin Public School systems, and I want to thank the teachers that have done an excellent job educating and inspiring them. They are exceptional children. Having said that, I have serious concerns about the critical mass that is being reached with the turnover of teachers in the school district. This is a document showing there's nearly 200 teachers that have left within the last, it looks like, 2 years. And I'd like you guys to be able to see that. And it should be a public document that people are educated on the massive turnover of the school district in Franklin. As a taxpayer of Franklin, I am very concerned with my money being financially handled properly to support the public school systems. And the cornerstone of the Franklin Public School System is the teachers. The website says that this is a better place to learn. I think that that falls short if you do not retain the teachers that are required to establish the exceptional school district that we all depend on and move here for. The other thing the website says is this is a better place to work. If you have such an incredible turnover rate, I highly doubt that that is correct. Obviously, there is concerns with teachers not getting appreciated and being compensated appropriately. Other districts are offering much higher wages to take away the exceptional teachers that we all count on to educate our children. Having a vision of a better place to work, a better place to learn, and creating a better community requires teachers as the cornerstone of our community. If teachers are engaged and appreciated, then students are inspired to be a better community members themselves and to become teachers and other professional staff in the future. And it inspires parents to be involved in the school district also, which I think is an issue that's being raised. Teachers need to be valued, appreciated, and need to their compensation needs to be reflected with that. The critical high turnover rate needs to be examined more closely. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. All right, I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion is made by Mrs. Sapersky, seconded by Mrs. Witkowski. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. School board calendar. Key communicators meeting is next Wednesday, October 18th at 5 p.m., first one of the year of 3. Regular Board of Education meeting Wednesday, October 25th, 2023 at the ECC at 6. School board retreat Monday, October 30th at the ECC at 5:30, and a regular Board of Education meeting Wednesday, November 8th, 2023, also at the ECC at 6. District Administrator update, Mrs. Bennett, please.
All right, good evening. So first, I'd like to show appreciation for our school board. Last week was School Board Appreciation Week, so we didn't have a meeting in appreciation. But thank you for being committed to our community and the time that you put in for everybody in our community and our schools. Just a couple updates on upcoming things that are new to the district this school year and have come off of feedback from last year as part of my entry plan, meeting with community and staff members, doing meet and greets in schools, and also holding stay interviews with Laura Lancor during our PD days. We took away a lot of learning, things to celebrate, but also areas to grow. So as mentioned in our community comment, we have a Better Place to Work task force that is starting and meets next week. So we've had that kind of rolled out information-wise over the last few months to get interest from our staff and make sure we have representation of different groups, different schools, and different grade levels and departments. So the purpose of that team is really going to be to work with us on what matters to you being an employee in Franklin schools. That can look like compensation, but also insurance, wellness, what does tuition reimbursement look like, or continuing education, professional development, whatever the team comes up with that we feel like is something that we want to look at and put together that package that we're hearing that we need to take a look at. It has been since 2014 in the research I've done that since we have reviewed it as a district. So I think we're all in agreement it's time to look at it and bring something forward. So that group will meet throughout the year. Andy Cromie, Laura Lancor, and myself will be co-leading it and working with our different groups. They'll also be going back to schools to share and receive more feedback to bring back to the team. We're also going to have a task force for a better place to learn. Jess, Mo, and I have been working on what that's going to look like, and the goal on that piece that's going to be rolling out in the near future is again to have representatives from all schools. And the avenue here is to learn about and talk about what learning looks like in the classroom, what's our instructional framework, and involve that work of the curriculum and student services team. So Bob and Leo will also be a part of that work and leading that in our district. That will roll out, like I said, soon, and again, the same kind of format, bring in interest from staff that want to be a part of it, make sure we have representation from across schools and get those meetings on the calendar. Part of a better community, Key Communicators was a group that rolled out last year in conjunction with the board and myself. So we had 3 meetings, well attended, about 40, 45 participants from across internal and external stakeholder groups. So that can include businesses and other ones in the community. We're continuing that this year. We meet, as you just heard, next week. We're up to 58 members and look forward to the feedback and collaborative work with them. Big work this year being looking at our next 3-year coherence plan, using that as just one stakeholder group to continue to get feedback on. I think another way we tie back to being part of a better community and where we know we can grow is in our services for students with special needs. Leo Ekman's been with us now about a month and a half, maybe, that might be even more, and has that opportunity to learn. We're going to have a 6th through 12th grade parent listening session, some other pieces that we've already put into place that I've updated at other board meetings, but continuing to connect there to ensure we're a better part of a better community. Educator Pathway you're going to hear about tonight. It's a fun celebration of work from our let's get this out right, sorry, principal at the high school, Mike Volo, Andy Thompson, Laura Lancor, Jess Mo, Anita Sandstrom. They've all come together to look at what does it look like to do a teacher or educator pathway at the high school and partnerships. So you'll hear more about that tonight, but I think it is nice to point out that that was a lot of work with a lot of educators in the district after school to kind of think about how can we learn and grow interest in that for our students and our staff. So looking forward, we're looking forward to starting our school updates during board meetings. So our next board meeting, we'll have Forest Park here and used to that kind of format from years past where they present in alignment with our coherence plan and what it looks like in their school improvement plan at their building. So thank you, and let me know if you have any questions. Sure.
So the second task force you mentioned, the new task force in learning, is that outside the coherence plan or how is it connected to the?
No, it's connected to the coherence plan. So it would really tie in with like your first 2 areas that you're looking at in achievement and growth in the plan. And then also more specifically, as we start out, our annual tactics this year, we have one around EMLSS and around the PLC structure. That would be a piece in the instructional framework that they would be learning more about. And the equitable multi-level systems of support. How are we reaching all students every day? Yep. How are we using what we know to do the great work in the classrooms?
But this task force is outside of the teams that are being directed to the coherence plan?
It's in alignment with the coherence plan. So they'll be learning more and having input into what does our instructional framework look like, what's that rollout plan looking like, and talking about what does learning look like in the classrooms, be updated if there's new resources or things being looked at. That's typically a separate task force. If Bob was here, he could talk about it when you're reviewing resources, but this would be more of the overview of it. And really, it's the opportunity to have multiple leaders, like more shared leadership is really what should be heard through those task force. So the ability for different employees from different schools to be a part of the work that's being done and giving input into and learning more about that. So trying to improve communication.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, reports, presentations, and other school board business. New courses, teacher pathway courses. Mr. Volo and Ms. Sundstrom, please. At all. Sorry. Welcome.
So Jess, are you driving the thing, right? And happy belated School Board Appreciation Week, everybody. So what you see, and if you advance, Jess, is really the product of, and to underscore what Mrs. Bennett referred to, we had a K-12 team last year with, educators from across the district come together on some evenings throughout the year. And remember, this emerged from our Education for Employment plan as a way to explore, career pathways and job markets and trends, and say, what are we lacking, what don't we have? So I think it has been said, and you're aware of, the need for educators who are highly qualified. And we believe that if our graduates all, went into that field, came back and wanted to work for us, that'd be a great place to be. So if you go forward, you'll notice that this is an information item with the idea that we could come back in 2 weeks after addressing any questions and making sure that we've, given you all the information you can, and then hopefully get this approved for 24, 25. So it could be in our academic career planning for this upcoming year. And students will start to do that in about a month. So believe it or not. What we landed with through some consultation with our educators and everything else is really a product of collaboration with our staff as well as people outside of our school, colleges, numerous colleges, educators from other high schools who've done similar work. And, we're really excited about what we have to share. And I think, Anita, you're going to talk through specifically kind of like the vision of, the partner we chose from a post-secondary trend. And we'll talk through a little bit more from there.
And yes, you can tell this is part of our action planning. So yes, we worked with an awesome group of stakeholders across the system, and we've ultimately landed on a partnership with UW Parkside. So they have a strong commitment to the educator pathway, and they're working with some other districts. And so this vision or this mission statement we wanted to share with you, that through collaboration with us, we could introduce high school students to the profession of teaching and become knowledgeable educators committed to teaching all learners in our ever-changing world. So we want this experience to be very grounded in our district. What was very cool as we were going through this process with K-12 educators is we had people on the team who had been Franklin school students, and actually some of them had graduated even when I was at the high school, so it's really fun. And they had come back, and now they're teachers with us, and their perspective was really valuable as we were exploring the different options and learning more. They would be like, I wish we'd had this back when they were students, which isn't that many years ago. So our rationale for bringing this to you, and I know you've heard a lot about this through the Ed for Employment plan, is we would like to expand our career pathways, especially our educator pathway. We would like to build our local educator pipeline. As part of the learning that we did learn that on average, a lot of teachers teach within 20 miles of where they grew up. And so to Mike's point earlier, it would be awesome if the students we have today, like our future colleagues, as they build their commitment to teaching. We also want to partner with an institution that has experience sort of flexibly meeting the needs of school districts. So Parkside has extensive experience right now with Kenosha, Racine, bigger districts like that that they've worked with, and they met with us and really talked through being able to personalize it for what we need. And in general, you've heard this from, I know Mike and I in the past, but how can we expand opportunities for students while they're in high school to experience college level work and experiences? And so we're hoping this pairing of getting to know education within Franklin, working with Franklin educators, with our students, and seeing themselves as people who could work with us in the future.
And I just add when we say college experiences at FHS, so Ms. Walters would be that, credentialed, basically, adjunct level faculty through Parkside who's working with our students in our building. And we have many educators who have similar, experience and backgrounds, who have a master's degree. And, in terms of then submitting information to Parkside, getting support and saying, yep, we would approve you as an instructor, that's already occurred. And when we think about college experiences, I'm going to be coming to you in about 2 weeks with, a list of 133 courses that kids want to take outside of our high school, which is great through Start College Now and early college credit programs. But the more we can bring things into Franklin High School where kids are having experiences taught by our teachers, and, whether it's a course we augment and add that addition of college credit, like CAP Spanish, for example, or build in additional opportunities, we're then removing one more hurdle for kids to get that college experience. And I can assure you that our teachers, if they're highly qualified to be teachers in our building, are also highly qualified to be professors in the collegiate level, will do a fantastic job. And no offense to college professors, but I'm very confident in our teachers' ability to meet students' needs in the classroom and fulfill that higher ed requirement that people would have. So just a secondary benefit as we come to you in increasing years, regarding college level work. It's an opportunity for us to expand our course offerings and maybe find some synergy with post-secondary partners for our own staff to do that. And we currently have transcripted credit. We have, again, CAP is one of the living, breathing courses. We have very robust things in terms of early childhood. You saw our REACH students last year. But we want to grow those things beyond just this pathway as time goes on. This snapshot here, and I know the text is very small on the screen, but you may recall the students last spring who came in, and every one of those students who was in REACH, that was our capstone for the early childhood pathway, and that's think birth to about 3rd grade. So it does transfer very well to those post-secondary plans. If you remember, I believe we had one future classroom educator, and then 2, I think it was OT or PT, bent and angles in terms of where they're going. And, they went through that child development 1, 2, and REACH. And I think they almost all took AP Psych and just put everything else on here. So what we're proposing here is going to be a course that really speaks to adding to what we already do well, early childhood, and also speaks more broadly to K-12 education beyond that for the student who wants to be a middle school special educator, a high school, physical education teacher. So it really would support what we already have. It wouldn't replace or supplant the pathway we already have that's very strong in early childhood. It would add to that, so it'd be additive. So I'm in REACH, what else can I do? How else can I get exposure? So we look at those things, our current course offerings, industry credentials, work-based learning, dual credit opportunities. The course would obviously be dual credit, and there would be a field experience component required. That's part of the draw to Parkside, is these courses had field experience required, and we would expect that to happen in our schools. So a very formal way to have kids get those pre-service hours in. They have to do for every ed program, but do it right here in Franklin. And just for comparison, I believe in our senior survey, 21 seniors indicated education as a pathway for graduation last year, and it was 15 in the class of 21, 22. So, if we think of somewhere between, 15 and 30 students every year trying to go into the profession, it'd be great if we could support them even stronger while they're in school, so they know what they want to do. Just like we have kids who do CNA and other stuff, let's get kids more education experience so they can have that real, is this what I want to go into? In terms of additional things besides the course today, we'd also want to start a student organization. Educators Rising is the one that is the strongest nationally. It's almost like FBLA, only education. So there's actually competitions, national and state level things like that occur. And it's a student organization tied to the profession, which most successful pathways have some sort of component like that beyond the classroom. So when you see our students compete at very high levels in the culinary arts, when you see the highlights of our students, competing and winning automotive, things, and again, passionate educators, like skilled educators, awesome students, and a supportive community give us those experiences. Like Educators Rising could be a component of that. So the idea is like starting that club base that again gives kids exposure beyond just the classroom. We'd want to come back and find the best second course, or maybe even more, but second course to say what do students do beyond this. So that may be with Parkside, but Parkside, we want to actually find something better than what they currently do as second or third or fourth courses in the partners they have. The field experiences, again, would happen in Franklin Public Schools. We'd be building on our early childhood pathway, and also the Department of Workforce Development created an educator youth apprenticeship option in the past year. How that works, because youth apprenticeships typically have to be paid, is still, I'm still trying to figure out the details of that, because there's not a lot of things that kids do short of like Kids Club or daycare that actually does pay in the educational field. However, that's an exciting thing that, when Andy Thompson talks to you about how many youth apprentices we had in these different areas, like how cool is that there's going to be a youth apprenticeship tied to education in our state that's supported the same way that a carpenter apprentice is, or a banking apprentice is, or accounting, whatever it is. And again, this would be a proposal for the upcoming school year. So the idea is that we could have this out in the course guide for 24-25. Students could sign up for it. Our goal would be to have, a strong class of students. Is that 20 or 30? I mean, I'm not sure. And does that grow? It'd be great if it did. I'm not sure what the cap is on that, right? There's a lot of factors that go into kids' choices. And our data would suggest we feel confident that students would take this opportunity and take advantage of it based on their post-secondary surveys every year, as well as just the data we get from our own REACH programs and other things where kids are saying, I'd love if there was something in addition to this to get me more experience in that. So with that, we're at your service with any questions you might have. I know you have the memo that describes a few different things there. College classes in high school have an incredible tuition rate. It really is. There's a commitment to affordability and access for all students that Parkside has. So just like kids who are in CAP Spanish through Oshkosh, there's supports for students who may be in financial need or maybe experiencing poverty. But that commitment to getting students in this program, having them be successful in it, is something that really resonated with us that we, again, are excited to share with you today.
Thank you. Angie, please.
Confirm they're not having to drive all the way down to Parkside.
It would all be here, yeah.
So right
With
in
our
Franklin.
recently approved instructor. Yay.
And what is the REACH program? What does that stand for?
So that's the Revitalizing Education and Child Healthcare. So that was the, if you remember Ms. Kraus coming last spring with the students. So it's so students take Child Development 1 and 2 in Family and Consumer Science. So it's kind of like the third course or the capstone course in that particular sequence. So those are the students who they've already done the SABRE preschool, right? They do that in Child Development 2. These are the students who do a partnership with, school, daycare, gym in the area. And they were our presenters last spring. So if you don't remember, it's a great board meeting. Check it out. They're awesome. Watch the highlights. It's great.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead, Maksud.
For FPS internships, which are offered to the students in this pathway, are they paid? And is there a pathway to kind of, to attract more interest? Where some of the internships offered in summer, especially I'm thinking about, where students, juniors and seniors, when they're looking for internships, and some internships I know are paid. They don't pay a lot, but pay somewhat. Will that possibly, if there is a pathway to pay, is it a paid internship which can ultimately increase the interest of the students doing this internship and expose them to the pathway of education?
I love the idea. I just know it's also not so for better or worse, field experiences for college students and for our high school students or internships for high school students in the district aren't paid. That's not a budget item we have. It's an interesting thought. And again, every educator who's at the table can tell you that there's all the field projects and experience and stuff you do. Heck, you pay full-time tuition to student teach, which is an interesting thing to think of. You're paying tuition to not really go to class, and you're working a full-time job. But
if the concern is creating interest in the class, the Educators Rising program, when we spoke with Parkside, they said that those two pieces sort of worked together, that students who were in the class became members of the club and then socially brought more of their group into the club, which then when those students realized, oh, there's a class component that can bolster my understanding and opportunities in my interest, then the students who were in the club that hadn't completed the coursework then would enroll in the class. So they sort of worked in tandem in creating that interest. So in hopes of creating interest, that club component might help as well.
And we do have students who will work for, Kids Club, which is, adjacent to education, and work for daycares if they've gone through some of the, childcare courses. And while it's not a one-to-one, the students who are working at a YMCA or other things like doing, being paid to work with youth, oftentimes like there's a lot of opportunity there. It's one step removed from us, and that's where the youth apprentice piece, like that's required to be paid, and 450 hours, so it's a pretty significant amount of time. So it's just a thing where like we're still trying to figure out how those details work out, because we know how it works with like a youth apprenticeship for the jobs we already have and kids have done for years. It's less certain how that looks for education in Franklin or elsewhere in the state, but it's on paper in existence, or will be.
Thank you.
Can I kind of piggyback off of both of your questions? When you talk about the field experience, would that be something that would happen at the high school, or would those students have field experience in other schools in the district? The point of my question is accessibility for students who maybe don't have a way to get to, say, Robinwood or Ben Franklin or something for that type of experience. How would you?
I think it typically depends on what the requirement is. So like, there's certain things where, and I can't remember, there's 3 different, I think, field experience components across the course sequence. But like, for example, I remember doing field experience in an elementary school when I was in a reading course, right? And it had to be a certain level, or a middle level course, or as middle level experience. So I think it's more open in general, but obviously we don't want barriers to be there. And like, we're pretty creative when it comes to getting kids to places. So they have a year-long class. So, in terms of like, we probably meet more frequently than a college class does. So like, just like our REACH students go to PV, and other elementaries potentially over the years, but PV most recently, like we can figure things out if there needs to be like a creative solution to get kids from point A to point B, especially in the context of our block and in context of, a year-long class to do a 3-credit college experience.
So there's, talking about numbers, is there going to be enough for 1 section, 2 sections? I know we don't know that answer until next week, but if would there be like a waiting list, and maybe we only run 1 section if there's 30 and it's given to seniors, or what happens in that situation with a class like this, the new class like this?
Typically, I mean, our numbers, we have so many course offerings. I don't know if it's 225 total courses on the books. It's something, it's kind of staggering, the opportunities students have. And we're thankful for all those diverse opportunities, and we want to create, more things. So I wouldn't anticipate the numbers in the first year, like being north of 30. And that being said, I don't know. So in the case of us ever having to look at, like courses and saying, this is the total enrollment, right? There's some things that naturally kind of like it doesn't fit for everybody, like in terms of where things fall on the schedule. But then if we have to look at, who would come in first, if it's open to sophomores, juniors, seniors, we can obviously prioritize seniors over sophomores, for example. But also knowing that like for every sophomore who gets in, ideally that's pushing them even further along sooner. So, we do things like prioritize seniors versus juniors or sophomores if we have those, decisions we have to make. And sometimes, again, the numbers have a way of working out where we oftentimes don't need to do that.
You've clearly thought about this, which is enough for me.
So if they do it as a sophomore, how do they build on that the next 2 years?
Yeah. So that's so more to come from us in terms of like what that next course is. Parkside has had successful implementation of a few different courses for additional courses in the pathway. Just those aren't necessarily the best fit for us. I mean, one's very specific to like K-8 math education, which is really cool for K-8 math folks. So anybody's in the room, like, bless you, that's awesome. And that's a very niche piece of education. Like we have students who want to be music educators, they want to be, physical educators, special educators, history educators, everything else in between. So we just want to find the best fit that's not, again, duplicative of things we currently have in child development or like psychology, but also like just what is that? And again, like being able to work with a partner and say, here's what we have, what do you have, and what else can we bring to our students? We're pretty confident that we'll have a course that, continues to grow that, and then again, like to your point of like, what does that look like then for a senior? As a senior, the education you'd apprentice, because we're talking, 2 years past next year. And by then, hopefully we have successful proof of concept for how that works.
And that'll give them a leg up. And in college, will credits, I don't, transfer or?
I think, yeah, so especially if they're going in the state of Wisconsin, the EW system, every course that you have and take, so, like we went to, well, in one case, same undergrad, but a different undergrad in Anita's case, for teacher prep and everything else, but like there's things in common for every ed program, and there's a limit to what you can do prior to being in the program. So, there is that thing of you must take these classes, but then you get admitted. And there's not an ed program in the state, at least not yet, that has said we're going to pre-admit high school students into the ed program. Like that they can get a lot done, but not actually getting in the program. So we think about that professional school piece. There's still going to be that chunk, but they're going to be, semesters ahead of their peers who are just going to the first time. And also, like, part of exploration of careers while you're in high school is this what I really want to do? And sometimes you don't know what that is. And for every person who says, I think I want to be a nurse, and they go through our CNA program, and then I talk to them after their freshman year of college, they say, you know what, I changed my mind, now I'm going to this. And they were a CNA for 2 years, and they took all of our courses, and they went to, MATC for more courses, and they still changed their mind. Maybe they're going to hospital administration, maybe they switch entirely out of healthcare, and that's okay. But we want kids to know enough to make that decision. We're all still trying to figure out what we want to be when we grow up, but like the sooner you can do it, the more economical it is. And also, we think it's going to be a good, opportunity to get our kids further, faster, and accelerate that pathway through, college experience is often more than 4 years in many cases for educators. So if we can get them, further and faster, that gets them in the occupation and in the field faster, and also limits their costs in college.
Thank you. All right, any further questions? Thank you, and we'll be voting next
meeting.
time. This is the only new course that we're going to be.
Correct, only new course for next school year.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Our Community Education and Recreation Department report. Mr. Anderson, please.
Thank you for having me. I want to go over the highlights of last year with the Recreation Department. I know that you guys have been given the board packet that we prepared. Program participation increased by almost 2,100 people. A lot of that happened in our cooking classes. We went from 1 class teacher to 3. We've got a student that went through Franklin High School that's now teaching for us. Her class is filled. All the cooking classes have waiting lists. Our fitness classes continue to be very popular, and every single one of those also have waiting lists due to the size of the rooms that we're using. Our sports camps have grown tremendously. We're at almost 400 kids now for basketball, with registration still ongoing. The real cool thing about the youth sports is, as I told you last year, Leah Voss, who's here, kind of got in a consortium with other rec departments, and those middle school, high school age students that sign up for youth sports that either got cut from their middle school team or didn't make a travel team that still like playing. We're still making teams now for them, and they're competing against other rec departments. They get practice time in Franklin, but they participate either in Cudahy. Franklin hosted the volleyball portion of it. So those kids are still able to participate in sports through middle school to see when they get to high school, maybe they've grown, maybe they have more interest. But that's a real cool thing, and this is the second year we've been doing that, and those numbers have increased a lot. Not only for soccer, for flag football, but a lot for our volleyball league that we run. So that's kind of cool. Facility usage has increased by over 10,000 hours from last year. As you know, this time of year, our large spaces are at 100% capacity. So it kind of at that tipping point we've talked about for the last 10 years, we're at it. You've got teams at the high school that are spring sports that want to practice in the winter. They don't get to do what other high school teams get to do because there's not enough space for them. Our rec basketball, we had waiting lists because we don't have enough gym space to take all the kids in the program that we normally have. Green space is another issue. When you look at the spaces we use, they're great, but it holds one field or two fields, so it gets spread out over the course of an entire day, which then ties up the field. Our feeder programs are very popular, but for example, our youth basketball feeder program gets an hour and a half practice per team for a week. Most other feeder programs in other communities are getting much more than that, but that's all the room there is. So that's something to look at. As we've talked about, there's decisions that are going to be made here shortly over the next couple of years of how do we handle this? Are we going to reprioritize? Are we going to relook at our board policy 3630 with the windows that people get to reserve facilities for? It's coming due now, not only with indoor and outdoor. The other thing that I wanted to quickly update you on too is the building project. We're finishing up the design phase over the next month, and that will go out to bid, which will be brought back to you early next year, Andy?
Yeah, early December, or January is the kind of the target right now.
The other exciting thing is we had a meeting with the planning department. Unfortunately, the planning department person has left since then. But the city is very receptive to working with the school district, the recreation department on their comprehensive master outdoor plan, which kind of lays out the focus of the city for developing parks and green spaces. We did bring up the thing of impact money. That is so far down the road with how muddy that gets, with who has matching, who owns the property, and all the things that go with that. We were looking at potentially being on the Parks Commission, but with the planning department person not being here, those 4 meetings since our meeting has been canceled. But I think there's still the energy behind us being part of the Parks Commission to help vote on things and discuss things with the city about how they develop green spaces is there. The rest of the report is pretty self-explanatory, so I'm opening it up to questions if you have any.
Angie, please.
Thank you, Brett, for your report, and it's good to see that our rec department continues to grow and that the interest is back up to pre-COVID levels. That must make you happy and also slightly concerned.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the message you've been giving is always the person coming to rescue us is us. So
Yeah.
it sounds like we're at that point still. When, in the one meeting you had, did you get a sense that the city comprehensive plan for outdoor space would be addressing any of the need for large number of green spaces that you mentioned, or did it seem to be focused in a different direction?
The initial meeting that we had, they need to update their comprehensive master outdoor plan.
I see.
So they've got to hire a company to come back in and relook at where they're at, not only with their community playgrounds, but large green spaces. Are they going to, what size parks are they going to build and they're going to do things with?
Pushing it
Right,
down the road.
that's out there a ways, but they're at least asking for the school district's information or what are our needs, which has never been the case before.
That's good.
Yeah.
Linda, please.
Yes, are you also aware that the city has an indoor recreation plan? In fact, they have a building on the books in the plan.
Mhm.
And where's that at? Where's that going?
I didn't ask about that. I mean, I've looked at the comprehensive master outdoor plan. That's been in since phase 1. A lot of the things that they adopt are by national standards that communities are supposed to have. We've talked with previous mayors about indoor community centers, rec centers, and it's never gained traction. So the things that you see in there about destination parks, about community tot lots, things like that, that's all due to the National Park and Rec standards that go into that. And then the city has to come up with a plan by population size as to what they're going to build.
But there is a building plan. I mean, they've identified
it's
square
a-
footage and needs.
By
in this plan.
population, when they get to a certain population, it's something they would look at. But from the conversations I've had, they were looking at green space. I don't know if the city would build a community center and then say to the school district, hey, do you want it? I don't see that happening. To do your comprehensive master outdoor plan, you have to have it done so that you can file for grants for DNR in the state, trails and things like that. So, I mean, they've got it in there, but I mean, we've never had a discussion about, them building anything in the 31 years I've been here.
I did share with the administration the plan that exists with the city that outlines a building.
Okay,
And I think we need to ask about that.
great. We should ask about that. Is it, to your knowledge, is it being built anytime soon?
I don't have the report in front of me, but I did share it with you. I believe it is
The one
in,
from 2015 or 2000?
it was
that-
around 15, but it went through 25.
Great. Anybody else have questions?
I would like us to pursue and ask what's going on with that.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. At-risk report, Mr. Ekman, please.
Thank you. Next up for discussion tonight is the annual at-risk update for fall of 2023. Basically, the at-risk update is a report on the number of students at the high school who are deemed at risk of not graduating or not on track for graduation. So we're going to talk about that. I think one of the concerning trends is that there's been an uptick in the data, and we're going to spend some time talking about that, and obviously that will be a priority to address what's going on there. So I have Mr. Jonas and Ms. Mulshine to help present tonight. Kind of an overview, we're going to start with the current status of students identified as at risk of not graduating, provide some information regarding steps that the high school is taking to support students, and provide a brief overview of the Community Reintegration Center. So those are some of the three topics, and then I imagine we'll spend some time discussing some of the trends in the data and what's going on there. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Mulshine and Mr. Jonas.
Awesome, thanks. I'm Anna Mulshine, school social worker at the high school. Thanks for having us. So I'll just be going over the brief definition of at-risk too, just so we all have that general knowledge on what that is qualified for students. So first, automatically dropouts. Those students would qualify for at-risk of not graduating, and then they would have to meet two or more of the following criteria. So they'd be 1 or more years behind their age group in the number of credits, so we look at credits for those. 2 or more years behind their age group in basic skill levels, so we look at reading and math on the pre-ACT and ACT. Habitually truant students, so those students that have 5 or more unexcused absence after they hit that 10 parent excused mark. Adjudicated delinquents, so those in violation of the law, parents, and then 8th grade students who are below in the basic skills levels on those areas in their state exams, and then those who fail to be promoted to 9th grade, which we didn't have any students this year. So that's positive. So here we look at just the trends from the previous years. Last year we ended up with 21 students that ended the year at risk, and then 26 at the CRC, so that's the Community Reintegration Center. They renamed that from the House of Corrections mid-year last year. And then as we went into this year, we had that increase of about 75 from the start of last year, so we're at 123 students that are at risk of not graduating high school, and then we have 22 students currently at the CRC. So then for the next part of it, I'm going to just break down the data a little bit. We have 43 sophomores that are currently at risk of not graduating, so hit those 2 indicators, 43 juniors, 34 seniors, and 3 seniors plus that are currently enrolled at the high school. And then we have those 22 students from the first Friday count, and that number can fluctuate throughout the year since students are coming and going. Some additional data to note, 23 students are currently enrolled in those alternative programs for all or part of their day. We have three of the seniors are currently in credit recovery or at another program. We have 8 seniors, 11 juniors, and 1 sophomore that are currently in those alternative placements. And then 26 of those 48 students from previous last year are no longer identified at risk. And then we currently have 16 students that were identified at the beginning of last year that are still on that at-risk report. So they might have not dropped off their truancy, probably might have stayed, or their basic skills did not improve, or they still were behind in credits.
So
So the main driver of the increase in the number of students identified was habitually truant students was at a rate that increased quite drastically. So to give you some information behind the data, attendance is a big focus for us because the attendance data was the weakest, or the reason for the increase in the at-risk number increasing the way it did. In the last few years, the number of students that are on our 10-day list, which is they've missed 50 blocks of school. Anna mentioned that in order to be defined as habitually truant, you have to be unexcused for half to full days, and that's 5 total days beyond the 10 days of parent excuse. So it's about the 15th day of school missed. The number of students that were on the 10-day list over the last 3 years has grown from 242 to 312 to 407. And the number of students habitually truant has grown last year from 186 to the previous year before that was 117. So the increase in attendance data was data we looked at as a high school staff, even as we ended last school year, and then set plans in motion over the summer and into the school year to think through what are the proactive interventions we can take, given that this is data we're seeing and this is data our area is seeing. This is a problem that's pretty consistent in our area. So what can we do at FHS, and what are others doing to combat the truancy increases that we're seeing in our schools, and specifically at the high school. So with that, we thought through what is the role of our student services and admin team to have interventions in place at the Tier 2 and Tier 3 level, and then what is the role of our full staff to intervene and support students, making the classroom a place students want to be every single day. So the work started in our leadership retreat in August with our school improvement team, developing actions around belonging so that our school goals not only are rooted in achievement and closing gaps, but first start with belonging, because when students feel that sense of belonging, then they are more likely to achieve, and we will be more able to close gaps. So we've continued to learn and make our focus for our year and our professional development in our year around that goal. And then additionally, thinking through our student services and admin team, what are our roles in continuing to support students that we identify as trending towards being truant? What are we going to proactively do to support them? So we took steps over the summer to do that, such as home visits, continuing to learn, and then starting to carry out some of those plans as we started the year. So like I said, universal focus on belonging. We've used that word a lot. Our staff's probably sick of hearing it. We used it a lot in August as we returned to school, with a focus on welcoming activities, a focus on social and emotional learning. That's rooted not only in the instructional framework, but work we had previously done, making it a bigger emphasis in all classes so students feel a connection to not only the learning, but the other adults and students that are in the room with them. We continue to think of what is the role of our advisor at Franklin High School. So as you know, every student is in an advisory on Wednesday. So today, all students met with their advisor. Those are smaller groups of 15 to 20 students that meet with a staff member. That's consistent over 4 years. So a lot of the time when we want to leverage a universal strategy, we leverage advisory. So today, for example, the lesson was around pulling up attendance data from the first month and setting goals, and that's not something we had done in the past. That's typically something that's done at the student services and admin level or in a reactive way. Today it was a proactive step in order to set a goal and have all students really own their attendance data through the first month, and then continue to hopefully see strong trends continue, or if those early signs of disengagement are starting to show, what can we do to intervene, and then how can we use the engagement and the relationship the advisor has to work with those students. And then you heard last year that we started Check and Connect at the high school. That program's now grown to support over 35 students, and we hope to continue to have that grow in our October PD. We spent time in our September PD and a Gear Up session training more mentors. And again, that's a mentor relationship. That's a one-on-one relationship. It's research-based, evidence-based practices. It exists beyond a year, so it's at least a 2-year relationship. And one of the main data points we use to identify new mentees is attendance. So we look at academic, behavioral, and attendance data, and given our concerns, we're really going to pinpoint students who are struggling to attend. And then through partnerships with families, we can hopefully increase that engagement and that attendance. So we have data from last year if they are returning to us. Otherwise, we have data from the first few weeks of school to look at. And then as we train more mentors, continuing to bring new mentees into the program. So within that, we've been able to have success. We've seen that, but now we need to continue to train more mentors so we can have continued success with our mentees. One of the other things that Leo brought up is just a quick update on the CRC. I'm not as close to this work, but as they're a piece of our data tonight, we want to make sure that we can celebrate some of the successes that we've had there. So you can read the data there, but we continue to have students work towards diplomas, work towards credits. The GED testing site is still a main focus for students at the CRC, regardless of the duration of their time there. It does create some, motivation and urgency when they're working to complete the tests that they need to complete. So you can see that we're continuing to focus on that. And then with the addition of a school counselor in that position, in that building, They've really been able to focus on what support they can provide for students after they leave, and continue to think through what are the resources that will support transitions either to continued education or career paths. So we're excited to see how that will continue to support the members of that school and continue to think through what we can do to further support their further life path in addition to the GED pathway. So with that, we'll open it up to questions. Go from there.
Is the new position state funded?
Andy says yes.
Yep, CRC is 100% funded from the state for every expense.
Okay. And you said truancy is more than 10 days?
So habitual truancy defined by the state is you get your 10 days of parent excused absences. So at the high school, it's defined as 50 blocks because of our 4 school blocks and goal block each day. And then beyond that, if there's 5 days of unexcused absence, which a day is defined as half or more, then after that 5th day, you're defined as habitually truant. And that resets each semester. So you can be habitually truant first semester and second. So again, our goal is that when we come back to you in the second semester, if given that opportunity, you'd see that data point improve, and that's how students would drop off. Anna brought up the other data points like around testing and credit deficiency. While credit deficiency can change, we won't have another testing opportunity between now and then. So
My
our main
question is
impact
more
would
on
be
the-
habitually truancy.
The 5 days, so how far, do they go like way past 5 days or?
All are part of 5 days. There's a whole unexcused, so the key is unexcused versus excused. So all are part of 5 days. Unexcused is habitually truant everywhere, all the time. So if a parent doesn't call you in, if you just don't show up for school, that can happen on day 1. A parent can excuse you for 10 days in the year. Once your 10 days are up,
And you're on watch.
if you don't have a there's reasons why kids that are gone more than 10 days that are approved. But if they're not, and it's something, you could hit habitual truancy after the 10 days as well, that your parent has used up their excuses and you don't have a medical excuse or some other reason. So that's the 2 ways you can be a state defined.
My question though is, is it typically 5? Are they 20, 30? I mean, everybody's
You have
close?
to notify at 5. So at 5, they become a habitual truant and they would be counted here at 5 days. They continue to be, whether they're at 5 or 8 or 20, but 5 is now you are habitual truant, 5 unexcused.
Angie, please.
So I'm sorry that your first 2 reports to the board are such, statutorily required kind of downers. So I look forward to future reports that are a little more positive, although the stuff at the end about the CRC was very positive. I was just going to say, I as a parent get confused by the definition of the whole world of absences, and I don't know, I suspect that a lack of parental understanding is not playing into the kids who are becoming habitual truants. Okay, those are 2 separate issues.
Matsu, please.
Were we able to look into the 16 students who were at risk last year, out of the group of 48? Were we able to look into what was the specific reason that they carried on into this year? Means because they seem to be at a higher risk because they were at risk last year. And as you mentioned, usually by the second semester, kids start dropping off. They haven't dropped and they continue to be there. So is there a specific reasons? And the next question is that if they are we trying to they seem to be at students which are higher at risk because, these are not newcomers in the pool, these are the old comers, who doesn't have changed their behavior. Is there a specific pathway or a specific support to uplift them? Thank you.
I don't have specific information on those 16. That's a great piece of let's look at someone who's multi-year at risk and consider what our interventions are. Just universally, if a student is on the at-risk for multiple years, it's likely that they're going to be pursuing alternative pathways. And we've told you in the past about our pathways, both in the high school and outside of the high school, that allow students to earn credit at a more rapid rate so that they still can attain a high school diploma. But then conversely, we're also looking at what other pathways do they need in terms of support, what other interventions do they need. But yeah, that'd be a great group to continue to dive into a little bit deeper. Most of them would be in that junior-senior age group, obviously, because they've been at risk for 2 years now.
And go ahead, please.
Question regarding, it sounds like you have created some strategies around helping with the truancy. What would you say, and maybe you don't have this answer, is your capacity for that check and connect? If you can only reach you have, 75 new students this year, how many mentors do you have that you can you know, if you need all 75 of those students to have a check and connect, I don't even know if there are 75 additional staff that you know what I mean? Like how are you balancing that and what's the plan
Yeah, and
for meeting those
Check and
needs?
Connect isn't the only intervention. You know, there's students on the list who are part of a pretty extensive adult team already, whether that might be Anna supporting them or a case manager if they have an IEP or other staff, and every student already has that role of the advisor. But right now, our goal is to continue to grow Check and Connect. Like, we don't have a dream number, and it's not something that we're looking for a full staff participation at this time. One of the big pillars is that staff are willing to serve as the mentor. So we started with our leadership team, and then we've been able to grow from there with those that are willing to support it. And then through the support of the district with continued training at Gear Up sessions, like at our last Gear Up, we had 9 new mentors across the district, so not just high school, but K-12. And then hopefully in October, having more capacity to grow from there. The other piece is we've had mentors who have taken on a second or a third student, because that can be a part of the program as you grow your own capacity as a mentor. So as we have mentors entering year 2 and 3 in the future, I would see that as another way to grow the program.
So one mentor could have more.
Yeah.
You don't need a mentor for each particular student.
No,
Okay.
no, and it's predictable that we'll have students who are at risk or in need, so it's a program we'd like to see continue. And again, that evidence and research shows that a 2-year partnership is the minimum. Like, it shouldn't be something that fades away after a semester. It's really extensive, and even, you know, we've seen that persistence of, okay, maybe the first 6 months didn't go great, and then we start to see that impact beyond that time frame.
How are you assuring that your staff, your mentors, are going to commit to that 2 years?
They're trained, like, I mean, they're given that information on the front end. It's a pretty big pillar of the program. So in our Gear Up, it's brought up, and then in the training, it's brought up numerous times. So they're aware of that. They have to be. We don't hide it.
Angie, go ahead.
One last question. It would be interesting. So first of all, I know a couple years ago, we asked for there to be a follow-up on this outside of the 1-year follow-up. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I'd like to hear about it in 6 months to see how we're doing. Again, sort of keep that cadence.
We've done that for 2 years, I think now,
I think
right?
so,
Had
yeah.
like a spring.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
I don't know how, I mean, statistically valid it would be, but it would be interesting to see how the kids who are enrolled in the Check and Connect situation do compared to their peers who aren't. And again, I know you're not going to be able to submit this to a journal, but it's out of curiosity.
I appreciate that we're being proactive, and we're finding new ways to be more proactive. I wonder what the way to, there have to be freshmen that are also at risk. Do we just not have them identified yet? Or are you starting to identify them and being proactive with freshmen? And I would expect that the earlier you get to kids, the better off you are, or the better off they are. So maybe you could touch on that.
I don't have anything from the data to necessarily bring up, other than that there's some that are high school metrics only that we look at, like the credit deficiency. They're not credit deficient when they walk in the door, but continued teaming with our middle school team has been an effective way to understand how to support students as they start the year, and also honoring that idea of a blank slate, but having some information so that we're able to support from the start.
I also assume that there's kids who had truancy issues in middle school.
Yep,
that
and
you know about.
or we're below basic. Yep.
Anybody else have questions? I agree with Angie that and everybody that would be nice to see what's happening in 6 months just as a follow-up. And you know, if it's like the past, this is going to go down, and we're working on it. So I appreciate that we're being proactive.
And I assume parent involvement is just inherent in every aspect of
Yeah,
this?
the aspects of the at-risk report are that it's mandated that they're, you know, informed, but of course then we try to form the partnership through that information. And again, setting goals with these students, routine check-ins, that's a part of the work we always do. And we've heard that from us for years now, but with this group being the size of it is, that's not going to change. It'll just be a bigger focus for our student services and admin team, because, you know, when this started, they had 1 student they check in with. Now it's grown quite a bit. So just making sure that if it's not somebody that's consistently been checked in, that they're now getting that support. But a lot of these students are seeing weekly or biweekly check-ins with their counselor, or with Anna, or with an admin. So just continuing to keep that intervention, as we know that works too.
I mean, it's good we're not just expelling them. It sounds like you guys are just doing a yeoman's job of trying to, I know you go to people's houses. I know that personally.
Done that, yeah.
So kudos to you for just coming at this from all these different
Yeah, and
angles.
the other piece is like, it really is at risk of not graduating. And so like the graduation rate is our key indicator of this. And I hope we can see that it's going to consistently remain strong in Franklin. That's our goal.
All right, anyone else? All right, thank you very much. Franklin Forward Debt Service, Mr. Cromie, please.
There we go. Okay. Technology savvy. So we're going to break apart. So tonight we're going to see the first read of the budget. That's the next piece on the agenda. This is really just the Fund 39 portion, kind of just broken out for us to review tonight. Part of the reason why we're breaking it apart is it's really part of kind of this entire piece we've been talking about now over a couple of board meetings and kind of have a series of meetings set up to discuss. So just as a reminder, some calendar dates here. On August 16th, we brought the master facility study that was presented to the school board. On 9/11, you did the school tours, did some review of that at the high school, I believe. 9/27, we revisited that master facility study. We brought a calendar as well, so kind of the overlay through that Gantt chart of all the pieces that will be happening. Tonight, we're going to talk about a debt service edition, and really starting tomorrow through whenever, we're going to continue to do district level planning with our building administrators and with our district level leaders, and then they'll help foster that down to staff within our buildings and bring that feedback as well as part of that. We know there's some long-range facility costs. Now, again, we haven't spent $1. That's really going to be up to the board to decide. But as you know, on the 16th of August, we brought 96 million and change of current state needs. So if we just fixed things up and made them work as they were designed to work originally, would be $96 million. But part of questions that came out of that, and these are just some of the pieces that were brought up by board members that we didn't even address. We didn't talk about elementary spaces at all. We didn't talk about CTE spaces or a field house or a pool. And again, I have question marks there because I don't even, again, we'd be just pulling on that. If we remember the knot, we're just pulling on the knot and we haven't decided anything yet. And so we haven't even fully developed out what those are. But they're all going to have costs associated with them as well. Again, whether we decide to do anything with them or not at this point, but we need to be planning as part of that, so when we get to decision-making time, we have kind of all these pieces lined up. So this is just a financial component to help get our heads around what does something like this cost long-term, or what does even planning for it look like. So what I have here is our existing debt structure. So that light blue is the principal payments we have. You can see they go out through 2035, 36. The darker blue is the interest associated with them. So a little bit dissimilar to a mortgage where we pay a flat amount every year. Our debt gets structured a little bit differently depending on when you can fit it in, or if you have debt falling off, sometimes it gets loaded on the back. But interest payments are very similar to your house, right? If you took a look at your very first mortgage payment, you pay a little interest, you pay a little principal boatload of interest, right? And that just shrinks the further you get out because you have more principal being paid off. So very similar in this fashion. We have a lot of interest up front, and that gets less and less and less as we pay off the actual principal of it, and we're borrowing less. What you see in orange is the defeasance that was brought last year, roughly $5 million. And that saved about $2.4 million of interest overall, and it actually took off the 2036, 2037 payment. Our existing remaining principal amounts for Forest Park Middle School, $29,270,000. The FHS, it's the Saber Center, some work with the music rooms, and a little bit other remodeling. I think the science classrooms, about $14.8 million is left. So roughly $44 million in total would represent that light blue. We're gonna bring together just a new debt scenario using $150 million. That number came up from $96 million of fixes. We haven't touched elementary, we haven't touched field house, we haven't touched pool, we haven't touched CTE. So we just knew it was gonna be big. So I just used $150 million just to see what it's gonna look like and how it's gonna fit in. It holds no weight on anything whatsoever other than it's a starting point for us to review from. The assumptions that are going to go into this particular debt are property value growth of 13.46%. 1.76% is net new growth, so new homes, new businesses, new developed land. The actual property value growth this year is 13.38%. But again, in order to fit this into presentation mode and working with our financial advisors, that those numbers of 13.38 don't come out to 10.1, but I had to have some information to them to work from in order to have it in time for tonight. The second year's growth, they're estimating at 8%, and then they're being super conservative for everything else and saying 0% growth. So assuming Franklin doesn't rise at all, then the next 18 years of this particular piece. Again, debt, we're just using $150 million as a way to take a look at it. We're using a 20-year structure and an average interest rate of 4.5%. So the reason that says average interest rate, again, school debt, a little bit different than your mortgage, is variable pretty much every term. Every term is considered a year, and that gets adjusted. It can be negotiated, but we like to bid it out to get the, we feel we're gonna get the lowest bid that way. But it is adjustable from year to year, but they're estimating 4.5% on average over the course of the next 20 years. So scenario one says we're not going to do any additional debt levy whatsoever. So this is actually just taking our revenue limit and plugging in our state aid amount. We would have a general fund of 24.47 million levy.
Just want to say, when I was reviewing this, I was confused until I realized that you meant for the upcoming fiscal year.
Yes. So what we'll talk about is our levy in our next particular piece. So if we just ran our revenue limit exactly as it was, our general aid, our voucher payments, the actual debt service payments we have of 4.56 million, and recreation. Now recreation does have 1.825 million built into it for the recreation building. So that part is still moving forward. We're considering that part of our regular revenue limit at this current moment. So if we didn't add any additional debt levy to that, we would be 2.09 million less than last year in overall levy. Our mill rate would go from $8.55 to $7.09. That's scenario one. Scenario two is saying.
I have a question.
Sure.
What is the last number, new debt mill rate impact?
Oh, great question. Thank you. My apologies. If we were to then add $150 million of debt, we would then move back up to $8.65. So adding $1.56 back whenever we decided to borrow that $150 million.
And what is the tax levy value of that?
I'm sorry, what does that mean?
You'll be,
Oh, what is the addition?
yes,
Roughly $9 million.
$9 million. Thank you.
Yep. Scenario two, maintain overall levy. So you can see general fund is gonna stay the same. Voucher payments will stay the same. I'll skip the third bullet. Recreation stays the same. Those are gonna be the same in all four scenarios. Debt service, you'll see, goes up from 4.56 to 6.65 million. So scenario two is saying we're just gonna keep our overall levy flat. We were at 34,648,559 last year. We're gonna keep it flat. That would take our mill rate from $8.55 and move it to $7.54. So again, if we then added $150 million of debt, we'd add $1.04 to that levy limit. Again, it's still $9 million of payment.
But
Regardless of the scenario, it's $9 million of payment.
But why does the rate change then?
Because
Same dollar.
for our debt service, we added $2.1 million now, so that would be part of that $9 million. So we wouldn't be levying a total of $9 million new dollars. We'd be taking that 2.1, we would add 6.9 to it to get that total of 9 for future years.
So it's a different base? what you're saying?
Essentially, because we're adding some debt service levy this year to help with the overall cost of that $150 million long-term. So we wouldn't be adding a brand-new 9 million, we'd only be adding 6.9 of that to next year. Or whatever year we determine that would be. Scenarios 3 and 4. Scenario 3 is going to be to increase our overall levy by 1.76%. That's our net new property growth. So property value that wasn't paying taxes on last year's property, but is added into the mix for this particular year. That's about $609,000 in an increase of overall levy. Again, all coming in the form of debt service. Those other 3 bullets will stay the same. Our mill rate would go down to 7.68%. Adding that brand new $150 million debt at that time would add 92 cents to the mill rate. And scenario 4 is levying up to the mill rate of $8.55. So adding about $6.7 million to the debt service this year. When we do add the $150 million of debt in, it would add about 21 cents to that mill rate long term.
And what percent increase is that?
The
Last year.
4.63 million
Correct.
on 30, I would have to pull up my
I
calculator.
think it's
so
13%.
I'll do quick math. Sure, we'll say 13% is probably pretty close.
Thank you.
So it's important to note a couple of things. One, I got this data yesterday, so I did not have it ready for the presentation. But over the last 6 years, our property value in Franklin has grown 47%, 47.39% to be exact. 8.82% of that is brand new property growth. This piece is part of the state biennium budget as well. We can anticipate Franklin adding $1.5 million to the school property tax levy credit. So essentially lowering property taxes for Franklin Public School residents by an aggregate $1.5 million simply for the school levy credit. So if we look at scenario 4, we'd increase $4.63 million in school levy overall. 1.5 million of that would come back from the school levy tax credit. So impact to taxpayers would be $3.1 million versus the 4.6 when you net out the school levy tax credit.
But
That was part of the
question.
biennium budget.
Can you wait to be recognized before you?
Do you get that, credit in all of these circumstances, or?
Yeah, that $1.5 million is coming back regardless of what we do.
Thank you. So
if we were going back to scenario 1, that $1.5 million still applies here.
okay, and what does that do?
Really, so we see $2 million less in total levy, right? The impact to taxpayers is about 3.5 million less in the aggregate.
Okay, thank you. Linda, please.
Yes, I would say, though, that the intent of that legislation is not to offset an increase, but in fact, reduce property taxes. We would be using it to offset an increase, which is not the intent.
Perhaps it isn't, perhaps it isn't. There may be intent in the law, I don't know. Thank you.
The last piece of info I wanted to provide is just an additional $25 million. So if we were to go to $175 million, you could add 38 cents for every 25 million you wanted to tack on. So it's really just a point of reference for you.
I would like to know what the,
Can you wait to be recognized, please?
Linda, please.
okay, yes. I would like to know what the levy impact is. Rather than a mill rate, I would like to see the levy impact. I believe you did provide that.
Yeah.
So you have that information
It's roughly $1.5 million, I believe.
of additional tax levy.
Yep.
Thank you.
So I just broke it out so you could see what that would look like from years 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm really more focused on the 150 million because it has all of those assumptions like clearly broken out. This was just a quick add to my part to know what 25 million does outside of that.
Linda, please.
So, and that is about $9 million more of levy, correct?
For the $150 million.
Yes, $9 million. Thank you. And our current levy for debt is 4.5 million.
On average, yes.
Thank you.
So just to show it in a graph, scenario 1 would reduce our levy down to the gold bar. We'd be asking for the black back. And you can see the pathway through to scenarios 2, 3, and 4 of where we'd keep our levy and what we'd be asking for back in terms of mill rate. So really, what would we do at the $6.5 million? So last year we did a defeasance, right? We talked a lot about defeasing debt, which is prepaying debt. So in talking with our financial advisor, really talked to me about the long-term strategy of, do we defease it now, or do we actually apply it to our first payment? And instead of paying $6.75 million of interest, or on $6.7 million, 20 years of interest, what if we just lop that off on the front? So really what he provided to me was $6.75 million, would save about $2.5 million of interest, or 37 cents for every dollar we defeased. If we were to hold it for that very first payment, should the board decide to go out to referendum to levy for debt, and we're able to be successful in that, and we paid that in the very first year, we'd save about $6.03 million of interest, or 89 cents for every dollar, with a year one additional pay, like kind of a balloon payment, but in year one versus in the back end where we'd pay interest the entire time. So what happens, like if the board says we've gone through all this and you guys say we don't want to do anything with it? Like, we saw all the problems you have, we've talked about these spaces, and we're not interested in moving forward with it. We could defease the debt at any time. So typical time frame for us would be to approve it. We defease in March after we get our first and second tax payment from the city, typical time frame. But this is going to take us longer than March, right? So by next August, the board really has to decide where they are. Let's say we come to August and you say, nope, we're not doing anything. We'll just work with our financial advisor and we'll defease at that time with that $6.75 million. Or we could just under levy our long-term debt for a period of years to cover that additional $6.75 million we levied. So in either case, we could use it to save money long-term in form of first-year payment, or we could defease it, or we could just help to offset our overall debt portion of our levy for a period of years to help make up for that $6.75 million.
Angie, please.
Thank you for this presentation. It was, like I said, it took a little while to figure it out, but you ultimately presented a fairly complex topic in a way that I was able to understand and grasp the intention behind your proposed defeasance. My theme for the rest of the meeting is going to be that we need to be looking at things in a long-term and a sustainable manner. Whatever decisions that I'm going to be supporting are going to be thinking, how can we not be leaving the board of 30 years from now in a similar situation, you know, with all the roofs going bad at once, et cetera, et cetera. So I embrace the idea of looking forward, and I do think that looking at mill rate is a reasonable way that most taxpayers understand, especially in light of the fact that 8.82% is new property valuation that we really haven't been levying for. There's been new homes built, new apartments built containing new current and future students. I wish we could put some of our overall levy into the general fund so that it could go to teachers, but we are limited statutorily by doing so. So this seems to be a reasonable way to keep pace with the growth in Franklin and plan for the long term in a sustainable manner. Thank you.
Linda, please.
The 8.2% that you referenced, that is over a period of time, is that correct?
6 years.
6 years. And we are levy for that. I don't understand the thought that we weren't. Could you please pull up the slide that showed the last year's defeasance? So you see, we are lopping off, prepaying a principal payment that is in year 13 of the, and we increased our levy $4 million last year, $3 million last year?
3.8.
3.8 million to prepay something that wouldn't have come due till 13 years from now.
Look into the future.
And when you're looking over a period of 13 years, there is a need to consider net present value of those savings that you quote. In fact, our financial advisors provide that number to us, correct?
They do. It's
And it
based on
was-
assumptions of inflation over the course of
Correct.
those
High
13 years.
inflation means that I can pay off that 13-year payment with much cheaper dollars than the dollars I hold in my hand today. And the net present value that was determined for this prepayment where we increased levy, $3 million, was $52,000. Is that correct?
I know it was in the 50,000s.
Yes, $50,000. So we increased levy for $3 million to save $52,000 of what the value of that money is today, because that payment is taking place 13 years from now. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to continue down this path of prepaying this debt. We need to understand that those taxpayer dollars, it's more important to taxpayers to have that money in their pockets now than to look and say, oh, 13 years from now, I don't have to pay that. Because now is important. And with high inflation, those dollars are more important. And we can pay off that debt with cheaper dollars if you just let the debt run. So I don't see any advantage to continuing to defease this, especially if we're looking at increasing levy. 13%, that's what we have in front of us, 13% to prepay debt that doesn't have to be paid, doesn't have to be prepaid. I know you painted the picture of setting us up for this $6 million payment that we haven't even decided what we're doing. And you're already raising taxes 13%, $6 million. We're putting the cart in front of the horse. We shouldn't be raising levy when we don't even know what our plans are. I will not be supporting any 13% increase in levy. I could support the 0% increase, which still allows some defeasance. And I urge board members to think about this. 13%, you look at our history, we've never raised taxes more than 2%. And this is what you're proposing.
Thank you.
And when we are assuming the total debt borrowing from instead of 96 million, including the Franklin Forward, to 150 million, if we create the scenario of 96 million, which we are projecting for 10 years, am I right? So if we stick to 96 million, what will be the scenario of the same thing, but if how much of deficiency will we have to do to achieve what we are proposing?
To just do 96 million? Oh, gosh. Let's say 2/3 of that, so I'll say 6 points. I'm doing this on the fly because $6.6 million. I would guess, but if our current state of facilities over the next 10 years, right, we wouldn't want to take all that 96 up front and fix there's some things on that list that are going to come due in 8, 9, 10 years. I wouldn't want to change them out next year just because we have the funds. So we would probably look at, if we were just doing that, borrowing this probably in 3 times over the next 3 years at $32 million each year or whatever. Obviously, Andy drilled into our heads that this is all $24, $25. So prices are going to increase. So we'd probably look at it in 3 different increments. So it's probably actually less than that because we can use 20 years on each borrowing. So we'd really look at it over 26 years. So maybe 5.7.
Anybody else have questions with the debt structure that Andy went over? All right, I think we can go into the budget and levy, first read of the budget and the levy.
Yep, so I think I'm probably going to get the date wrong. January 25th, I believe, was the very first time we saw a preliminary budget. I know I've updated 2 of the sheets inside of the presentation, which are kind of the general fund at a glance and the special education at a glance. So in January, we saw those 2 particular documents. I really like to work in the buckets because the buckets make sense visually and they're pretty easy to think about when we think about like a salaries bucket, a requirements bucket, grants, versus looking at a line item. And especially in January, like we haven't even delineated all that out. We're talking like such big things focusing on the big buckets makes it easy. We brought back that budget end of March, beginning of April. We brought it again in May and then June for approval of a preliminary budget. And then back in August, on August 16th at the annual meeting, we brought back kind of the full second rendition of the budget. So tonight's really our third iteration of it. All along since January through August, we talked about two key components related to employees, and that was a 4% pay increase and 10% health. So we've maintained that 10% health. Now you'll notice in the budget, we were able to put $500,000 back into fund balance specifically committed to health because our health plan did better than last year. We kept that 10% in, as in July and August, we're tracking at 116% of premiums currently. So hopefully that's going to smooth out over the course of the year, but we're tracking rather high. In any case, what we really would like to do is move that committed fund balance for health to about 33% of our healthcare spend. So right now we're at roughly $7.5 million for easy math. So we'd like to increase that to $2.5 million. That gives us a 99% actual valuation of two horrific years back to back and being able to fund it without having to pull any general fund dollars to do that.
Linda, please.
Could we in fact use our general fund to cover that?
Yes, we could.
We could, and not go 10%.
We could,
and
yes.
accomplish the same goal. Thank you.
Angie, please.
Is there a way to account for the money that you need to build up to allow the health plan to operate somewhere other than fund balance? It can become a bit confusing looking at that fund balance overall and not knowing that part of it is sort of dedicated for the healthcare.
Yep, you cannot.
Okay.
We are required to place it into fund balance, but we place it into committed. So it doesn't necessarily help us if we just take a look at the raw fund balance. But when I look at it, I see it as unrestricted, which is wide open, restricted, which the board would have to approve something.
Okay.
Committed, which is like if you underspend common school funds for library, then you have to put a committed fund balance in and make sure you spend it next year. Or healthcare has to go into this committed portion of it.
But when we originally went to self-funded insurance, the board made a commitment that we were going to have to build this, that we wanted, not going to have to, that we wanted to build this for a couple of years to build up that fund separate from fund balance.
I would tell you that there isn't a healthcare consultant that's not going to tell you to do that. Now, whether you follow that advice or not, that's up to the board to decide. But there isn't one who's going to recommend not doing that. Again, that if you get to 33%, you'll get a 99% actual actuarial valuation that you're going to cover two horrific years in a row. You're like, really what it will help you do long-term is smooth out your healthcare. So if we can implement some healthcare savings measures, so ideally we're looking at how do we provide better healthcare at cheaper for employees, for everybody on the healthcare plan, better, that's long-term, that's better for us than a 10% additional spend, which adds $700-some thousand to the operational budget. Like if we can smooth that out long-term, because the state of Wisconsin's trending at 10% year-over, it has been for well over a decade, just climbing. So we need to figure out how to smooth that out. Part of going self-funded is the idea that we can, I don't want to say manipulate our health plan, but we can modify our health plan to provide different avenues to people. So like our direct contracting with MDI for imaging, right? A fully injected shoulder, MRI, which is the highest, most cost expensive one you can get, we pay $900 for.
Oh, that's really good.
At Aurora, that's anywhere from like $3,000 to $6,500, depending on which Aurora you go to. So we can pay $900. So if we can get employees to do that, which is the same image that you're going to get at Aurora, or you're going to get at Freighter, like long-term, that helps us. And orthopedic bundling care for surgeries, same thing, like the same philosophy that we're going to get better care because hospitals aren't going to want to readmit us, so they're going to give us the best surgeon. We're going to get it fixed right the first time. Nothing is 100%, but we're going to get it fixed on a higher percentage, much right the first time at a cheaper cost. Like those are the things we want to implement. And then we want to offer them free to employees because that helps people decide to go there. right? It can't make anybody go there. We can't do that unless we hardline our health plan to say these are the only things covered. And I don't think that's the right avenue for us to do either. But we have to find those ways to help smooth healthcare out long-term. So really building up that piece. The other piece is the 4% raise for employees across the board. That's an aggregate raise, right? We're talking large dollar numbers, not on every individual.
5%.
Well,
He's talking about
January through
January.
August.
Oh, sorry, please.
We talked 4% and asked people to be patient and get us to third Friday count. Part of wanting to get us to third Friday count is roughly 94% of our revenue is wrapped up into third Friday count between revenue limit, which is state aid and property taxes, open enrollment in, and categorical aid. Covers 94% of our budget. So if we pull every other revenue stream, we're really only affecting 6% of our budget, right? So that third Friday count is very big in terms of the revenue limit. So by waiting till third Friday, making sure we have all new employees in their actual salaries and benefits, because every time someone new comes in, it's an estimate until we actually hire that person and they actually select the benefit. We're able to move to 5%. So I know we've heard a lot about 8%. Every 1% for us to get higher is $330,000. So roughly $990,000 plus some change if we want to move from 5% to 8% would be that cost. Those are really the big highlighted changes. Now, how do we get to that 5%? Well, our regular school enrollment actually dipped a bit. Our FTE stays the same. They're a little bit wonky because you get less than one FTE for a 4K student. So we have some more 4K students, which help levy out the loss of K through 12. So we're at the same amount of FTE. Summer school killed it though, went from like 48 to 71. So we
Count those?
Yep, we get to count summer school. So that's counted by minutes. It's a big calculation. But in any case, it went from 48 to 71. So 23 FTEs, that averages out for us to 7 a year when you divide it by 3 on the whole number. So we get to add that 7 to our revenue limit at 11,800 kids, right? So that's about $83,000 that was added. So our prediction was very close, and we're thinking like $65 million, and we're off by 83,000 on the revenue limit. That's pretty close. So we were right there. Transportation, we didn't need as many buses as we had predicted. We need a few more than last year, but not many as we had 2 or 3 years ago to still route everybody. So we saved some money there. We certainly saved some money on employee benefits because we benefit, we forecast everybody at Family Health, Family Dental. We did lose on open enrollment though. So we have less students coming in than we anticipated through open enrollment, and we have more students going out. So our net open enrollment cost shrunk. So we were doing pretty good at like 2.3 or 2.4 million. That's down a couple $100,000 this year. We've talked a lot about open enrollment out. Internally, we've talked a little bit about it here. Typically, students never even hit your doors when they open and roll out. Families move in, they stay in the district that they were, or they go to wherever mom and dad work, and they do something close to that. I'm not going to say that's everybody, but that's the majority of kids are doing that. They've never hit your district. But for some reason, we jumped up this year in open enrollment out, so that cost, or that net, shrunk a little bit. But all of those factors, when we put them into the batter, so to speak, for that apple turnover, we end up being able to move to 5%. But if we want to move to 8%, we'll have to find $991,000 to make that happen.
So I do not have the depth of knowledge and acumen that my fellow board members have. But you talk about 8%. I mean, the people that are filling my email and the people that are coming to the meetings are the teachers. And I get why taxpayers want to have a predictable, but they don't move to Franklin for, the low tax rate. And they're building and building and building. I just have to think they're moving here knowing what's in store taxpayer-wise. What about 6% raise, not jumping up to 8%, but a 6%? Is there any finagling in the budget that it doesn't have to approach $1 million? It can approach whatever 6% would be, just so we're.
Yep, every percent against $330,000. Really, when I look at the budget that we presented, the malleable part is really principal budgets or department budgets. So when we broke apart the coding system and provided directors with their actual allocation. So prior to 23, 24, they did not have that. So when we broke that apart, I really gave the directors the directive of come up with what your total budget is for next year based on what you are actually required to do. So some of us have contracts. Andy Daniels in facilities and buildings and grounds has contracts for certain components of the building for maintenance and things like that. And what are your needs? We didn't even talk about wants. So those departments came with requirements and needs. So really what we would be looking at is adjusting our principals' budgets or our directors' budgets. I'm not going to say that it can't be done, but something's going to have to hurt somewhere, right? There's no great decision on it, right? It's the best of the bad decisions is where we're trying to get to. So if that's the direction tonight we figured out, but someone's going to hurt somewhere regardless of what we do.
Matsu, please.
Because, Franklin School District being a high achieving school district, and the biggest asset which we have is the teachers, Is there a way where rather than paying off so much of debt, can we use that tax money to?
Nope, those are completely separate buckets by statutorial design, so they don't cross. They're completely separate, divided by a brick wall.
Angie, please.
Is it fair to say that things can come out of that? It seems like everything can come out of the general fund bucket, but nothing really can go into it.
Could we transfer dollars to debt service? The only one we can't transfer to is community service.
I see.
Because that's a leviable fund, so they do not, it's a leviable operating fund, so they do not allow a transfer to that. We can transfer to Fund 50 because that's not a leviable operating fund. Transfer everywhere else.
Please, Linda.
Can I ask one more
Please.
question?
Sure.
Because we have heard so many times about the retention of the teachers, and of course, we have heard from them. Are our health benefits more lucrative as compared to other school districts, or they are comparable?
I don't know if they're necessarily more lucrative. I don't think they're designed to steer people to high quality, lower cost healthcare, kind of like we talked about with the imaging, right? They're not designed for that. The vast majority of our staff are on the lowest deductible portion, so like if I chew through that and it's pretty low, that I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but if it's not my dollar coming out, I'm not as conscious of it. It's like handing your children $20 to go to concessions and say, bring me the change. It's not their $20, so it might all be blown. If you told them to spend your own $20 and you'll reimburse them, maybe, then they're probably gonna be a little bit more conscious of it. So not to say that like people are misusing it, but am I gonna go to MDI or am I gonna go to Aurora if it doesn't matter? Like if I'm not seeing that cost. So that's where we have to I think we just have to incentivize our plan a little bit differently to more cost-effective things. Because long-term, if we didn't have to add $700,000 to health, and we could plug that over, like we've solved 2/3 of that equation pretty simply. In long-term, we can get there. It's going to take a couple of years with a health plan, probably 2, 3, 4 years to get there. Long-term, we can. We can curb healthcare costs or healthcare rising. It takes some plan design changes that again, goes 0% to employees, but we just end up routing more people to that MDI route or to something else. It just takes a little bit of time. In 2 previous districts, we've gotten it down to 2 to 3% year over year. But again, like anything else, it takes time. You got to get some steam going and get it moving forward.
Linda, please.
We're providing this as an aggregate amount. What is the administration planning to do with that aggregate amount across teachers?
Sure, so once we have whatever the board decides to approve, then we'll start looking at what that's gonna look like in the structure. So typically it's pulling together all the salaries and starting to look at what that disbursement's gonna be. It's usually aggregate, not just 5% if we went with 5% on every single salary. But that's stuff that we haven't finalized figuring out yet. We don't know what dollar number we're working with yet.
So it won't be across the board?
Like flat 5% on top of everybody's salary. it potentially could be, but that's not typical to what the district's done.
Thank you. I will also want to say that I know we've had 2 years of really high inflation, and it's been difficult to meet that CPI range. But I do want to remind the board that we have in previous years, we did exceed CPI in several years. So I think as a district, we do try to do the best we can and value our teachers. We don't just stick to CPI, we look beyond that. And we look, it's not just 1 year, it's year, you have to look at your years together. And I do appreciate the lack of really being able to know where you're going as a teacher because of the change in the salary structure that we went to after Act 10. And I do feel that definitely needs to be looked at. But I do think that the 5% is the best we can do at this point.
Well, I also applaud the work that was done with the, I think it was finally the ESSER money, which created, the administration created a $1,000 stipend for all teachers, which, while it didn't raise their base, it is, I think, about 1.5%. If it was a raise, it is money. So I applaud the efforts of putting together the task force. I applaud the efforts of finding use for those one-time funds from the, and I applaud going to 5%, because I think it's necessary. I think going forward, I think we'll continue to do that sort of thing. Ann, please.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I'm glad we're at 5% instead of the 4% that we were before. Certainly that's an increase. I guess my question with the task force, is the ultimate goal of the task force to have a solid schedule for salary so that our teachers can see predictably where they're going to be? Understanding, of course, that we are limited by what the state gives us, and we all know that our budget process is not predictable at the state level. But I mean, would the goal to that task force be a regular, solid salary schedule, or is it more sort of like, let's look and see what we can do?
So easy answer to that is no. If it's a salary schedule, like I could just put one on in a spreadsheet right now and try to figure it out. The ultimate goal of the task force is to figure out what does compensation really look like holistically in the district. So that could be, we want to go back to school and we want district to pay for it. So maybe part of compensation is reimbursement for credits. Or we want, I don't know, everybody that has 5 years of service to be at a minimum of X dollars. Like that, there's going to be several levers that are going to get pulled on it. It's possible that one of them is a salary schedule. But ultimately, really the goal of the task force is to define what compensation should look like and how are we going to design it. How can we design it reasonably to fit kind of what, really, when I think of Laura and I and Annalie's job in there is we help facilitate to a bunch of people who are going to own it. So we can provide data for them and they can give us the levers they want to pull and we can figure out what that might look like and provide that back. But it's really up to them to determine what those goals are. So part of our really first meeting will be to determine like what are the goals of that. And so kind of through some processes, narrow down, there's going to be 40 people in there or whatever have you. So there might be 40 different goals that people show up with, or, it might be tweaked a little bit, but 40 different variations of what that looks like. And we have to somehow narrow that down to one, not one necessary thing, but one plan.
One plan.
So really looking at like the bucket of money that's there is what's there. Like how can we disperse and look at that different? And what do our staff value? right? Because if you walk across whichever border to whatever district, everybody has, in essence, the new funds that are added every year. Everybody gets a little bit different per pupil, but they're trying to figure out the same problems, right? We had a parent speak very eloquently tonight about, you know, there's more teachers needed than teachers out there. So like, how are we being more creative in what it means to work here and be here so that we're not getting an email on Labor Day weekend that says, I got a cold email from blah, blah, blah district with this offer. What are you going to do? Like, we don't want to be a place that we call and negotiate because I'm willing to just walk out the door. But if you're willing to think about that opportunity, like what made you think about that so that you don't think about it next year? Because Labor Day weekend, that's just an example, sorry, should be like your time to be with family. It should be everybody's time to be enjoying the last days of summer, whatever it is you do on Labor Day weekend. So this task force is really looking at, like, we've heard loud and clear, this is something we need to look at. We don't disagree. Andy's gonna do a nice job walking through the budget and what is that bucket of money after we pay buses and utilities and how much already goes into salary. Like, here's the amount we have to work with. Like, what do we value that we want to put into that? So yes, like Andy said, it could be some kind of salary scale, which is always going to slide with what we're getting from the state. We're never going to be able to just say it's X dollars because the last biennial we got $0. So that would have done things that it would have pulled those strings from somewhere in the district, right? But some kind of structure to that. But then also, what does it mean for wellness, for well-being? What is professional time something that really matters? Like, where are those pieces that we value? So there could be 40 different ideas, likely there will be, and like the tough part will be getting through that process and discussions to determine what are our top ones and what can that look like, and is that what most value, right? Like, is it going to be perfect for everyone? I mean, we hope, but that's tough, right? But that's the goal, right? That's the goal, and getting more voice and more thought and creativity behind it. And from what I have spent time learning about the district in the past is that that's not necessarily how we've come around it, and that there has been a lot in our stay interviews that even say, by the time we got to the second half of them last year, we said, we know we need to look at this. We're going to create this task force, and that was well received at that point. And just the amount of people that volunteered to be on this committee to be at 40, that means some aren't on it, because at some point you just have to decide who's in the room with 80. It's going to take longer, right? But we're optimistic. But what that'll look like, we don't fully know. Like, that's the plan to move forward. But if we had the outcome, we wouldn't need the task force. So.
Andrew, please.
I have two questions. One, how do you plan to keep the board apprised as to this task force's work? A lot of what you do, we don't need more than a yearly update on it, but given that this directly impacts one of the most important things that we do, I'd like to think that we get updated somewhat more frequently. I don't know, perhaps you haven't thought about that yet, but I'd love for there to be some sort of regular
Yeah, absolutely. We have
eye
the
in the
first
sky.
3 meetings on the calendar, so I can include updates in my district overview after those meetings of kind of the next step.
That would be helpful.
And then at the end, we would do something more.
If it's not too
obviously-
burdensome.
No, that would fit in well with all the committees, really.
You sitting on any money in this budget that you're just sort of sitting on, waiting in case a rainy day comes up? Is there any hidden line items that we should know about?
As you know, I also teach at MSOE with Ms. Mo over here, right? So I teach just one component of a balanced budget, and I don't want to spend your time wasting it telling you this West Dallas, West Milwaukee story. But what I learned really quickly in West Dallas, West Milwaukee is the easiest way to balance your budget is to take one number, write it over here, and write the other number over here, and then you put those two numbers on a piece of paper and you say, look, we have a balanced budget, right? But there's like no integrity behind that. The component I've come around lately in thinking about that class is it's super hard to actually come up with a balanced budget exactly, because it's two random numbers that when you add them all together, the chances of those actually being equal are very slim. So yes, we're sitting on a stockpile of like $5,000 of to the good.
That's not as
but
much
it's
as I was hoping you were going to say.
$5,000. And my thought process in kind of finalizing it is I could just plug that $5,000 in somewhere and just say whatever is an additional $5,000, but that's not true. So I didn't want to do that. And really, again, that kind of iteration of teaching students at MSOE about that and thinking more about the process and really the integrity part of it is we're $5,000 to the good in what's being presented here today. But again, it's not a windfall. And if we learned anything from a couple weekends ago, we spent that $5,000 on a pipe in Pleasant View's floor. That's going to cost us, I think Andy mentioned, somewhere around $200,000. So we're now $195,000 in the red, but we're going to use Fund 46, our long-term capital improvement project, to fund that particular project, so.
Speaking of maintenance and building, we used to roughly say $1.2 million, or that's the number I recall. A roof that cost $1 million now probably costs 1.75, or I don't know the number, but it's significantly more. What is our buildings and maintenance budget, or are we kind of waiting for the outcome of some of our forward Franklin?
Well, we've been
costs?
able to place some money in Fund 46 long-term over the last several years, so we've used that to augment. That $1.2 million, it fluctuates. I think this year is $1.246 million or something like that. So it fluctuates, but on average, it's about $1.2 million, so we augment it with Fund 46. In the last 3 years, since kind of the COVID shutdown, roofing's gone up like 47%. Before that, it was actually pretty predictable on a percent increase every year, but now it's still variable. So we're augmenting with Fund 46, so we're using those funds faster than we had anticipated on some particular projects. Some have been planned, the high school baseball field, the high school softball field, right? At some point, the high school football field's gonna have to get done, or the main stadium field is gonna have to get done, right? So some of those things we have to plan, because those are very large costs and aren't coming out of your CIP budget every year if you don't want to do anything, unless you don't want to do anything else. So we have to stow some money away every year for that, so thankfully we get the opportunity. But we're using Fund 46 to offset. This year, it's roughly, I think $450,000, $500,000 worth of projects will come out of Fund 46 that we pulled from our operating budget. But in Andy's review, I don't want to say dire needs, but they're like high pressing needs for simple things like rooftop units and roofs to get done in this next particular year.
Linda, please.
Yes, what do we have in 46 now, Fund 46?
Oh, God, truthfully, I don't know offhand. I can check inside the document here and be able to tell you.
Maybe you can. Oh, there you
No, it'll be. So our capital improvement fund, $5.6 million is what we have right now. You'll see $1.35 million is being added. That's essentially the transfer from, for all capital improvement projects. And then there was a small transfer being used from Andy's operating budget to move to Fund 46. I think we talked about that over the summer, the transition to help stop having to get everything done by June 30th, when contractors may or may not be able to fit us in until July or August to still get things done.
Matsu, please.
Wait, I just want to verify, 5.6 million before
Correct.
you've done any of your shifting.
5.6 million at the end of the last fiscal year.
Thank you.
The Franklin Forward 96 million, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it include plus minus 7.6.
7%.
Plus minus, it was plus minus, it could be less or more, am I right?
Correct. Yep. So, yep, like if we took everything to bid and won out like a bandit, yeah, we could say 7%. Chances are we're gonna win some, we're gonna lose some. We're probably gonna wash close to 96 million. What that plus minus 7 is, if you win them all, you're gonna be short 7 million. If you lose them all, you're gonna be plus, or 7%, you're gonna be plus 7%, right? Chances are we fit somewhere in the middle. But that's planning for best case to worst case scenario across the board. Typically you average out. Having done a whole bunch of building projects, typically you average out over the long haul. You win some, you lose some. Your goal is to get to that 96 and be good with having, just using that example, having covered everything you said you were gonna cover.
And that included the possible inflation adjustment for 10 years, am I right?
That was $24, $25 only, but those projects cascaded for 10 years. So there's no inflation built into that. That plus or minus 7% is based on $24, $25. So there's no 5% every year or whatever calculation C.D. Smith would use.
Well, and I would add
year-over-year.
too, if you decided to take all that on at once, you're likely not actually taking it all on at once, right? You're spacing it out over a few years, so you're bidding out at different times and.
Yeah,
inflation
kind
will
of as I
naturally come
mentioned,
in
we'd
there.
probably do it in 3 segments, right? Because I don't want to replace that air handler that probably has 10 years of life now, because we just killed 10 years of life on that air handler and moved up that entire cycle 10 years, which doesn't make sense.
All right, so do you have, yeah, please.
Yeah, I just
go-
have,
go forward.
so this Friday, we'll actually get our actual state aid. So the exact numbers you're seeing here are gonna fluctuate in the state aid area and in our property tax levy for general funds and our property tax levy for voucher students. So those numbers will be finalized on Friday, October 13th. It's typically October 15th, but DPI said they'll have them out at some point this Friday, given that Sunday is the 15th. Ultimately, we're planning to hold our mill rate flat. So we'll adjust our additional debt to cover whatever potential increase that we might see. I don't know what the numbers are for general aid because they haven't come out yet. We've been holding strong at that about 27 million, which is the DPI estimate from July 1st. So we've been holding strong with that, but that could go plus or minus depending on how we sit in the entire state in terms of property value and last year's expenditures that gets put into the cake batter and then they figure it out at the end.
Will you send out an email with those numbers?
You'll get an entirely new updated packet
Oh.
for the 25th. And in the board report, I'll highlight the adjustments from state aid and reassess the property tax levy so you can see it apportioned out by those bullet points. Not much will change in this outside of that, unless some other direction comes, presumably in the next week, so that we'd have enough time to have it ready for the board meeting.
Linda, please.
Yes, I just want to make it clear that I do plan to make an amendment at our next board meeting to reduce the budget. I think 13% is too high, and especially when we have a budget that increases 13%, we have no new buildings that we have approved. There's no new referendums that have been passed. And we had a favorable state budget, which included a reduction in tax levy for educational purposes. But we seem to want to override that with this 13% increase for debt reduction, which, as I discussed before, does not have a favorable net present value, given the long-term nature of this defeasance. I also want to remind the board that this is voter-approved debt that he's talking about. And when voters approved those debt levies, they didn't sign up for this accelerated payment plan that required their levy to go up by 13%. That wasn't the agreement when they approved that referendum. And as you see, we have a very favorable interest rates and a stable repayment plan over the life of the building. We don't need to prepay it. And the proposal I would make would be the scenario that you presented, which would be allow our tax bills to remain stable. And I need to emphasize that we hear about the tax rate being the same, but let's be clear, we do not approve tax rates. Property taxes are not like the sales tax or income taxes. We have no policy or state revenue limits around property tax rates. Revenue limits are around tax levy. The rate is simply a calculation. And I've shared with the board some history on, we have seen our property rates go down because we have watched our property values go up. That's how we stabilize our tax bills. And why is stabilizing taxes important? From a bigger perspective, we need to be affordable to all our citizens, not just the business and medical professionals and business owners, but for the hospital workers, the custodians, the mechanics, our city workers, our teachers, and other workers that are not business, are workers that our business owners need. At the National Night Out, we were all there. We heard from an alumni who was trying to open and enroll her children into Franklin. When it was suggested that she move to Franklin, she shared that it was unaffordable. I don't know if you realize this, but the school tax levy is the largest portion of the tax bill at 40%. The city's portion is 25%, followed by the county at 22%. I did check the city's website to find out what they are proposing. Their tax levy is going up, I think, 4.5%. And keep in mind that they have a state limit based on net new construction, which is the number that Andy identified as the 1.74%. They are limited in what they can increase due to that number. in addition to that, they can also, if TID's closed, they can add that to theirs. So we are proposing a 13% tax levy increase. The city is coming in at 4.5%. How can we justify this? No change in the tax rate does not equal no change in the tax bill. And I also want to leave with you that savings for our taxpayers today are more valuable than 13 years from now. And if we were to make this change, we would not change any of the educational services that we are providing. We would simply be reducing, maintain the tax levy as the same as last year. I will be making this amendment next meeting, and I urge your support.
There are 13 people around this table. We differ on some things, but make no mistake, we all want the best for this community. What we model as teamwork is important to this community. We are the board. Our job is oversight and to set the direction of the district. It is to set policy and to hold our team accountable for following that policy. The most important policy that we set every year is the budget, which makes this time of the year especially stressful for school board members, as we want to continue to move Franklin Public Schools forward and think both long and short term. In the 5 years I've been on the board, I've gone from having very little understanding of school finance to understanding it quite well, but not as well as Mr. Cromie and Mrs. Bennett. Every year, there seems to be something about the budget that is scary. Whether it was the fiscal cliff or COVID funding, ESSER 1, 2, and 3, the 21-22 biennial budget that provided lots of dollars that we couldn't spend, or defeasance, which creates future flexibility around the uncertainty of inflation. Mr. Cromie and Mr. Milzer before him did a great job of listening to the board for direction and then creating a budget that helps provide first-class education for FPS students and tremendous value for its families. We also have task force going forward in which other administration is trying to help out with our most important people, our staff, the teachers, and moving that forward. And this is why I plan on voting for this budget as presented. Anybody else have any comments? Thank you.
Can I ask one question?
Please.
The salary increase which we are proposing to the teachers, does it apply to all the employees, including ECC, or only to the teachers as a separate pool, everybody?
Nope, all employees top to bottom, so that 5% aggregate amount is an aggregate for every employee in the district.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to policy 4130 and 4241. I guess 4130 is the first one.
Okay, so I am the first stop on your policy adventure this evening. So the first one that's being presented to you is 4130, which is our driver, drug, and alcohol testing policy. At this point, there are no major changes to the Department of Transportation recommendations. So at this point, our policy would not have any significant changes to it. So I'm happy to take any questions on that. Okay.
Thank you.
Again, has there been an addition of, because I know that CBD and marijuana THC has been becoming more, prevalent use in the teenagers and the kids as such. Has there any policy on kind of a possible any changes to the policy of testing or anything like that, or their behavior, or what's allowed and what's not allowed on the school premises, including, of course, I know that you're not allowed to come drunk in the school, right? But what are you allowed to smoke marijuana and come to school in a high state?
So this one is specific to employees. So this one be related to students at all, and this is really specific, just that is something that's kind of come up also with people driving like vehicles. And the Department of Transportation as a federal organization overrides any decisions that each individual state might make. So the Department of Transportation still tests for all of the different drugs, and you can still be penalized if you are under the influence as a driver with a CDL license for a bus driver or a commercial driver.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to policy 4241, contact minutes.
So 4241 contact minutes, and it kind of has the same memo to go with 4242 for teacher preparation time as well. So these are currently board policies, and at this point, the recommendation is to remove these as board policies and incorporate those in the language into our handbook, just because it is more related to all of our other employee groups. This type of explanation about their work schedule and their workday really falls within our handbook. We don't have anything specific related to custodians hourly or custodians work schedule as a board policy.
Angie, please.
I had a question about this, and it was answered for me, but it would be, I would love to have anytime we are having something moved to the handbook, even though I know we do approve the handbook every year, if we could just see the language that's going to live in the handbook.
Absolutely. I can bring that forward for the next.
Observe that migration. Thank
Yep,
you.
I can bring that for the next meeting.
My only question with this policy was, has there historically been any need to reference this? Do you have teachers coming to you every year saying, well, my contact minutes are this, or, you know what I mean? Has it historically been needed, or have we really not used it?
I wouldn't say that we have a lot of issues that come up that need to specifically reference this policy. The contact minutes becomes more specific or needed when it's for the encores and the specials at the elementary level, just because their time that they spend with students is different than their traditional classroom teacher. But we work through those as needed, and at no point has we gone over the policy or had that be a question. Really based on the number of instructional minutes students are in school in general. It's based on a 30-minute lunch and then teacher prep time. It's difficult to go over those instructional minutes.
Linda, please.
So those instructional minutes, is that go back to what the state requires certain instructional?
Yes.
So there is a tie to that?
So it's the instructional minutes for the student's day is what is tied to the state requirement. So that's different for elementary, middle, and high school. And then the instructional minutes for teachers for the encore and specials is really to make sure that they're more in line with what a traditional classroom teacher would experience in terms of their contact minutes with students.
So the policy was kind of in place to kind of clarify that?
Yes.
But now we can do that in the handbook. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for either of these policies? All right, policy 6122, release time for religious instruction.
Mr. Blessington was not able to be with us tonight, so I can take any questions on those two policies. There's two policies coming forward, both of which had just minor technical changes. There's not any substantial changes. I would add for the religious instruction in schools policy, I know we alluded a little bit, we had a kind of tangential conversation about attendance with the at-risk report. This is something specifically on board policy that's an approved excuse, even outside of a parent excuse. So we have added a code. That's not in the update, but just to add, we talked about that. So related to trying to clean up how we're coding attendance, we now have a code. It's actually REX, so that if a student has to be absent from school, it kind of takes it out of the mix of the rest of the attendance code and almost excludes it from being, because that is a specific thing in the board attendance policy. So that's the only thing I would add. Otherwise, there's no changes to religious instruction or summer school attendance.
Linda.
I'm just curious, how much, is this a lot of time is requested for this, for religious instruction? Or?
I would say all schools that I know of have students who participate in religious customs during the day, religious practices during the day, and then also days throughout the year where they are not in school. I would say both. So during the school day, making arrangements so the student can go to a place to pray in most cases, and then being absent from school on a day when school's in session. that's an
So it
approved.
happens quite regular.
I would say it happens regularly. We have students, that we have families that choose to do that in all of our schools. Yes, it happens regularly.
Thank you.
And that doesn't count to the 10 days.
It counts in the 10 days in terms of, but it's a separate code. So let me just put the bottom line. We would never, ever, ever question a parent's ability to do that. So that's why it's coded separately. Sometimes if you just do a general parent excuse, it could be illness, it could be out of town, it could be we're going on vacation, it could be a family appointment. I'm trying to think. So there's a big batch of things in just a general parent excuse. This is a specific thing that by board policy we do. It's an approved excuse.
And that's on when you sign into your little Qualtrics thing, it's a choice.
Correct.
Okay.
Good question, though.
All right, thank you. Anybody else have a question?
The only thing I will say is that maybe the parents need to be, I think, more educated, because some parents are uninformed and they hesitate to take this religious excuse because they're fearful, oh, you know, my kid is missing the school and all that stuff. So repercussions of that. So maybe reassuring the parents that, you know, this is a allowed day off until unless you inform us, blah, 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 all the stuff. So I think in that way, maybe it's a, we as a district maybe can do more, I think, to educate the parents, because I do hear from time to time that the parents are, you know, a little bit hesitant, and sometimes they are anxious, oh, you know, and they try to go around multiple ways to accommodate the school timings and all that stuff, especially it's once or twice a year, not every day of the week, it's once or twice a year. So maybe if the parents are educated that, hey, you know, this is allowed and it will not become, you know.
Seems like a theme is nobody understands the attendance rules, and I don't know, maybe it's a hopeless thing to try and do it, but you could probably have a sort of attendance 101 update in every building newsletter every week, and we still wouldn't scratch the surface. But
We've tried to get better, so
No,
you've seen a little
noted.
bit. I'll tell you what really made it difficult is during COVID,
Yeah.
when we were saying, when we had to excuse students staying home for longer periods of time, things flexed a little bit in the system. I'd say we back to doing it right, but that feels different when you were being told you had to stay out of school. And I'm not blaming COVID, I'm not, but I would say during those 2 years of COVID with lots of kids in and out for longer periods of time, I think the rules got even more confusing. So we've been trying to add stuff to newsletters. We can add more.
I mean,
You're not wrong.
It's doing great, but, you know.
You're not wrong that it's confusing.
Too, right? Like during COVID, even the state gave some
Correct.
grace on letters, so now you're back to sending the letters that you have to statutorily, and it's, yeah, there probably could be
yeah.
a good reminder on that too. Of
Yeah.
If, like, you don't need to panic if you're not getting a call from us, but we do have to, like, just keep everybody informed.
My husband panicked last year, that's all I'm gonna say.
All right, anybody else have further questions? All right, we'll go quickly to school board liaison reports. Please, Angie.
I was just gonna say, I look forward to our next mini retreat time when we can clarify what exactly we're supposed to be doing and how we're reporting out on it. For now, I enjoy meeting monthly with Jess, learning a lot of new things, talking about wide-ranging topics.
I would second that. I met with Mr. Blessington regarding these policies.
Ann, please.
I will third.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were raising your hand.
No, I was. I would appreciate the guidance I think that we're going to get at our next retreat about our board liaison meetings, but I am fascinated in my meetings with Mr. Daniels, and just want to just let you guys know, just kind of briefly, real quick, what we talked about in terms of our energy data and how just kind of re-looking at some of the things in our different buildings by our custodians has really increased or decreased our usage of electricity and gas and things like that, and just some of those different changes that are happening, just even from thinking about, do we need to have the lights on at 6 in the morning if nobody comes into the building until 8 o'clock in the morning? Simple things like that that can really kind of make a difference, and starting to look at that long term is kind of cool and interesting. And I know we've been here a long time, I won't tell you everything, but it's cool. It's good stuff, good work going on.
All right, school and community engagement reports. I will report that Mary and I went to the WASB dinner last night, and it was a good presentation. Mr. Ross Miller is the new executive director, and we talked about accountability at our table, board accountability, but more importantly, 3 people got awards, and it reads Certificate of Achievement. The WASB awards level 1 to
Level 1.
Angela Beer for
It's a start.
demonstrating a high level of commitment to Wisconsin public school students for participating in WASB professional development opportunities.
Oh,
I won't
thank
read
you.
them all.
Okay.
Dr. Beer, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Ann Sapersky is now level 2.
Just want to see you wearing the pins. That's all I want to see.
When we got that lapel.
And I am now level 3.
Congratulations. All right, good work all. It's always important to learn.
We bowed.
Oh, there's a
I'm
pin.
not sure what name
It's
it
at home.
is.
I didn't want to lose it. I'm putting it here, lose it.
Oh, goodness.
Sound like the Surgeon General.
Yeah.
All right, any other school and community engagement reports? Obviously, there's a lot going on, and
Well, I'd just like to say, I want you all to hold on to your hats. I met with my principal.
I heard you met with
After
Dr.
being
Mobley.
canceled. So
was canceled?
I'm not the
No, it
wretch that
wasn't.
you all said I was.
Nobody ever thought you were.
But we had a really good visit, a very good visit. Dr. Mowbray.
Yeah, which school?
Oh, you have
Dr. Mowbray,
Southwood Glen.
Dr.
Yeah.
Mowbray
Oh,
said
she's very
she
nice.
feels that she had a good, healthy turnover in her staff this year. She was able to hire teachers with no less than 6 years of teaching experience to fill her vacancies. And she's really working very hard with her support staff, which I said to her, please share that with other principals, your plan, what you're doing. I think it sounds really great. And the one thing that she said, a quote that I wrote down, is she said, we're stronger for our teachers' voices.
Oh.
So she agreed with me. Or Siri agreed with me. So I had a great school visit. Got to see the little learners engaged, and it was fantastic. Made me want to go back to the classroom.
Oh,
I said,
Debbie.
For a short moment? Like,
no, I really did. She's
Laura will
Dr.
contact you
I was
tomorrow.
gonna say,
I don't think we have a policy against that. so
We
we can
need a
have-
third grade long term.
There we
It's
go,
like, I gotta
Debbie.
go.
I was wondering if, like, when I see a baby, I was like, oh, that's so nice to hold the baby naked.
It's always good to hand it back.
Make them 8.
Yeah. All right.
All
I
right.
also did attend the SWSA Zoom meeting. And I'll get those slides out to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you, everyone. I'm looking for a motion to enter into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.851D to review district threat of violence drills, district safety plan and goals, and Wisconsin State Statute 19.851C for district administrator goal setting. Can I have a roll call,
moved.
please? Oh, sorry.
We need a motion. I motion.
I'll second.
Thank you.
All right, the motion was made by Dr. Beer, seconded by Mrs. Yank. Roll call, please, sorry.
Mr. Sprague,
Aye.
Dr. Beer,
Aye.
Mrs. Wiskowski,
Aye.
Dr. Khan,
Aye.
Mrs. Sapersky,
Aye.
Mrs. Yank,
Aye.
and I also vote aye.
Thank you, we are in closed session.
Can we
32, future agenda items include the annual health report, new courses, teacher pathway courses, 23-24 staffing update, budget approval and tax levy, Franklin Forward Elementary School visioning, spring 2024 early college credit and start college now request approvals, policies 4130, 4241, 4242, 6122, 6451, all of their second read, 24-25 school calendar, WASB honor roll recognition for 5 community members, Franklin Forward High School visioning, and policies 4215, 5120, 5260, 5500, 5802. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn the
I would
meeting.
like, I did make a request for a future agenda item. Regarding our direction with the facilities planning.
So do you want to have a separate agenda item for facilities planning? Because we have several facilities planning
Well, it's,
agenda items.
I want to revisit our direction in terms of whether we're going to pursue building or considering redistricting in the short term.
I think isn't that what we're getting to through all of these smaller chunks of Franklin Forward?
Yeah, we need to continue this process, and if in
To
the
learn.
end you want to suggest that we not
There's redistricting,
attend to it, or
we have talked about
redistricting will be
redistricting
part
at
of
some
it.
point.
But I do not support the idea of exploring, just putting the kibosh on this exploratory phase.
I feel like each agenda now, we have a Franklin
Yeah.
Forward that's kind of helping us see each individual piece of the pie. So when we get to
Well-
the end, we know what we want or
Unraveling
need.
the
Oh, yeah, sorry, I'll use the right metaphor there. Is
Which
we're-
I know, but I heard the question asked I did listen to the board meeting, last meeting, and the question was asked if we could pause and redistrict.
That's not what
Or
I
to
asked.
give us
I asked
5
if we could redistrict our way out of the long-term problem, and the answer was no.
I think I heard that it would buy us, we could go 5 years. I mean, just look at the report.
Well, again, what is the harm of continuing to receive the data that's already been collected and worked on by the team?
Because I think we could be spending our resources on redistricting as opposed to
What resources?
our administrative resources. I mean, I think we should look at the 10 years. I think we could redistrict and gain 5 years, and then in 5 years, start up what we're doing
So
right
not
now.
think about this for another 5 years. I do not support that idea. I can tell you right now, there's no point in putting it on
I'm
the
asking
agenda.
for a future agenda item so we can discuss the pros and cons of that.
But they would be elementary schools that would be redistricted, correct?
Correct.
Well, we could probably talk about it, right? Under letter E, elementary school visioning, maybe that could
Sure.
be part of
Certainly
that
could ask the question
conversation
there about redistricting.
And those two visionings then, because you don't have projected out into December, this goes into November. So then December is that workshop date, which is actually a separate date for the board too, because by then you'll kind of see like what's the visioning with those guiding principles for the elementary and what's that for secondary, kind of like Andy hit tonight. We haven't talked about field house or pool or the exact CTE spaces or what some of the differences are in the elementaries, whatever all that is. These next two, the visionings, are thinking about those types of things and starting those conversations. And then that December time, there's a whole separate workshop for the board, because by then it's, like Ann said, well, you kind of have all these pieces, because there's so much to it. It's a complex problem, right? And then it's time to really start diving in. So if redistricting wouldn't come up in those, it already has come up, it's already out there as an option, it's right in the raw first stuff too, right? Like, if it wouldn't come up there, that's a big part of that December discussion is like, okay, so now we have all this, and you get to discuss as a board, so what are all our options? And you start dwindling down to what do we want to get to survey on? I mean, that's the ultimate goal. And then from there, you have survey results and you just start working towards, well, not just, there's no just.
So I'm understanding then that redistricting is still on the table.
Redistricting is likely going to be a part of any plan that
There's
you
going to
bring
be
forward.
redistricting
Yeah.
at some point.
All right, let's talk about it.
Okay, we will on the scheduled meetings.
I think yeah, I agree. I mean, they're certainly going to talk about redistricting because Countrydale will have so many students at some point that,
Yeah, why are we waiting?
Okay,
don't
so it's
know.
a future agenda item in which redistricting can and will be brought up, but it's not on the agenda tonight.
I'm looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I would like to have a board debrief moment. Speaking of administrative time, it wasn't on the agenda, but we usually have board debrief on the agenda.
Sometimes, yeah.
Please.
I would just like to find some consensus among the board about our process for requesting additional reports from staff outside of open session. There's been a lot of email, myself included, back and forth with staff in which questions are asked, but then requesting of time to be put in for additional reports. And I think that we should get in the habit of having consensus among the board if we want staff to be directed by Anna Lee to produce additional reports for the board. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Can you give an example?
For example, asking Laura to produce a breakdown of what the salary levels and time served by all of the different current staff members are. Or asking, we did it very informally at the high school when Andy had to go through and pull the financial data from the past 15 years about how much money was spent at various schools. I'm concerned that we are producing extra work without full board consensus.
No, it wasn't 15 years, just, you know.
Whatever. It was, I think it was estimated to be 9 hours of time spent producing that report.
I mean, we certainly have talked about that. We could talk about an agenda item for that.
Sounds good.
At some point. To talk about. I know
I
we've
think we
talked
should talk
about
about
it
it at the board
previously.
retreat.
Okay, sounds good.
That sounds a great idea. All right, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved. Second.
All right, motion was made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 9:39. Thank you, everyone.
Who at that meeting yesterday said, we got our board down to 35 minutes?
He said occasionally.
What district is that?
Oh,
Neil.
at the.
Oh,
Neil.
you're, Neil?
Yeah. Neil is a Conemaugh.
I think we've had under an hour.
Last, was it
Yeah,
last?
I mean,
month or
once
2
in a
months ago?
while, once in a while.
Sometimes.
If you participate in their trainings or their online webinars, if it's through the WASB, they track the hours and, yeah.
I met an instructional coach from Kenosha. Who told me, she didn't know I was on the school board, but
Don't
she
worry.
told me, she knew I lived in Franklin. She
you.
told me that one of her absolute best teachers from Kenosha left Kenosha and came here.
I mean, it's going both ways.
At the middle school, and she said, that woman cannot stop talking about how she loves this district and all of the good things that go on there, and she said, and she was that principal.
Jenna, we just checked in with Jenna on how
I'm
it's
like,
going with her
well, I'm
this week, and yeah, she's doing great things.
So glad to know that. Frustrated. I thought it was such a nice, kind of off the cuff statement.
Right?
You know, like, it's so good they had that backup plan in place, and I was that
impressed with this woman when I met her.
Take that, you know, education.
Let you think that.
Oh, that's nice one.
You're kind of rougher on the edges, lady.
She was a late hire. She was,
Yeah.
She was,
you
Aaron
love right around the
Aaron left and went to, he was the one that got one of those cold emails, like, we'll give you this 5-year plan, $2,500 sign on first year, $2,500 sign on second year, like, just insane, and left, and like.
School districts can do that now, huh?
Yeah.
I just don't understand how the teachers that have been here 30 years really think they're going to get their full.
I think like the part I didn't finish and close, I realized I didn't connect my full thought, was like, the newer, next, like the latest, I don't know, 8-10 years, like, more flexible, gonna move, like, it's not the same thought process as when you entered education even 15 years ago. And for our more veteran teachers, that's hard to understand, because that's not their wheelhouse. Like, they're not going out and applying other places, probably mostly because they know they won't get paid what they're getting
Plus,
paid
you know
here.
what? It's a lot of work to apply for a job.
Oh,
Any job,
yeah,
you know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
Like,
And the app process. and
Yeah.
then-
all of that,
Yeah,
that's a
and
lot.
starting
It is.
somewhere else if you've been somewhere else
And
for
you don't
30
have
years.
friends.
Yeah,
It can be
yeah.
scary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, who's gonna bring you a coffee if it's not your friend in the morning?
Right, if you can't get there, yeah.
Yeah. Who will unlock your classroom door if you're a minute late?
Right? You gotta have that person.
So much. Alright, friends. Thanks for the cake.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I didn't see what flavors.
you get
we got.
vanilla?
It looks like
Vanilla.
confetti. Oh, vanilla.
I got
One of them
vanilla.
look like
You know what? It says classic vanilla.
We
That's
must
you
be,
and I.
we must
We're
be
just very
plain, we must
classic
be
vanilla.
classic vanilla.
That's our
Something wrong with classic.
personalities. That is not true. We are confetti cake.
That's, well, you might be on.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not.
You are too.
I
You drive a bus. You're confetti cake.
my gosh, you had plenty of confetti cake, if we want to call it that, in your bus this year so far.
So, so my route goes over by you. So my first drop off isn't until almost Southwood Glen, so it's on 35th Street. So drive.
Take 2 minutes.